up, guys? Welcome to Real Talk, the unedited, scripted, unfiltered show where I sit down with an eSports personality and talk about anything and everything. I'm JP McDaniel, and today on the show we have not just a StarCraft 2 personality, but a YouTuber as well. John Bain started as a DJ at the age of 13 and now is one of the most popular men on YouTube at 27. With his channel Total Halibut sitting at 707,635 subscribers as of this recording, he entertains countless gamers on a daily basis. We'll be talking about his childhood, his rise to being the king of the web, and picking his brain on popular topics on the show. For now, let's go ahead and introduce John Bain. John, how's it going, man?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. Just recovering from interesting gig I ended up going to on Thursday. I couldn't really speak much yesterday.
Yeah.
Iron Maiden has a tendency of making that happen to you. My God, that was a good gig, though.
Nice.
So good.
Nice. Well, I want to talk about your music interest, of course, because you did do some DJing. But first off, I just want to know, how's the U.S. been treating you since your return to it?
Been pretty good. Well, the humidity over here is terrible. I'll have to deal with that. I'm still not quite getting there. We spent quite a lot of time on the West Coast last month, stuff for E3 and a lot of engagements with Twitch. I was at San Diego, San Francisco, and LA, and all of the stuff on the West Coast was so good because it was a nice, clear air. There was no humidity. Yeah. Then I get back to North Carolina, and suddenly you get off the plane. It's like getting off into a swimming pool. It's, oh, God, why am I even wearing clothes? What's the point? They're just going to get soaked anyway, but... yeah, aside from that, it's been fine. We got back and they decided, hey, you know what? We're going to pass some terrible proposition that bans gay marriage and does all sorts of really horrible things in this state. It's like, yep, I'm really proud to be a member of this state. Thanks, Bible Belt. I think we might be getting out of here sooner rather than later. But aside from that, no, it's been really good.
Awesome, man. Well, as with every guest so far on Real Talk, let's go ahead and start with your childhood. So, where were you born, and where did you grow up? Was it the same town?
Nah, I moved around quite a bit. I was born in a town near Newcastle, and that's in the northeast of the UK, pretty much as far north as you can really get without hitting the Scottish border. We moved around quite a bit because of my dad's profession. He, at the time, was a priest for the Church of England, so every 5 years or so would be in different places, which is part of the reason, I guess, why this accent ended up the way that it is. But... yeah, it was kind of weird because I'd never be able to put down roots for all that long, 5 years at most, and then be bumped off to a different school, to a different town, wherever he was needed, really. But now, obviously, he's a lot higher up in the organization, so he gets to pick where he lives, and as a result, we ended up settling down back in the same area, really, at least fairly similar to it, and they've been there like for the last 10 years, so it's somewhere in between Newcastle and the city of Sunderland. It's pretty much slap bang in the middle of the two.
Now, what did your mom do for work? Your dad kind of traveled around a lot with the organization. What did your mom do?
She was a teacher. She did a lot of teaching with inner city comprehensive schools, and then later on was teaching in what are essentially kind of the last stop before jail schools. So the violent kids, the criminals, as well as there was actually like a section which was dedicated purely to underage, basically pregnant girls. Jesus. So she dealt half with those and then half with the guys who you basically needed self-defense training in order to deal with because they'd probably pull a knife on you at any moment. Yeah. So she was fairly well equipped to deal with that, but by the end of it, she decided it was a good time to wrap things up. She essentially retired from that, and now she does a lot of piano teaching. So she's essentially done with that.
Did your mom have that role throughout kind of your entire childhood? As the
she actually worked at the same school as we went to at one point. Wow. Which was that was semi-awkward to say the least. I think you could probably imagine if you're parents teaching at the same school that you're going to, then there's going to be issues coming out one way or the other. Not so much in terms of favoritism, but more like you get the piss taken out of you for it. It's just one more thing for kids to rag on you for. I never really had to go to the same classes as she taught or whatever like that, but yeah, it was still a bit weird.
Did you have any brothers or sisters, or do you?
Yeah, I've got
Not, did
one
you?
of each, actually.
Really?
One of each. Yeah, my brother's 2 years younger than me. He went to university for music production. He's graduated that. Now living down in Lancaster, actually working for the NHS at the moment, while he's doing all of his stuff that he wants to try and get going for his band and things like that. He's doing a lot of different music projects. He dips in and out of live DJing. He's got his own nights at a couple of clubs around the area for mostly EBM, electronica, dark wave, cybergoth kind of stuff. And then my sister is 2 years younger again, and she she ended up going to St. Andrews University, actually, studying theology. She's going down the same kind of path as my dad did, and is actually the only one in the family that has. Everyone else has got really no connection to my dad's work whatsoever, but she went and did the degree in that, and is now looking to get involved in some way in probably the church, I would think.
Well, it seems like a very musical-oriented family, which...
We always get that. We
Yeah,
always get that.
kinda
Every
explains
one
a
of
lot.
us plays at least one instrument, like most of us two.
What do you play?
It's what I used to play, unfortunately. So one of my biggest regrets, actually, was falling out of that. There is a story associated with that. We can maybe break that out a little bit later. But I used to play classical oboe. I was pretty damn good at it as well.
Really?
Like, really, really good at it. Like the best in the area. And it was weird how I picked it up, because I saw someone playing an oboe on TV at one point, I think, and I said to my parents, I want to play that. But you can't play double reed instruments until you're a bit older because of the lip strength that's required to play them. Very hard, very expensive instruments as well. So I started off with the clarinet, hated that, and then played a bit of the piano as well. Didn't like that either, and then was able to start playing the oboe, and I played for quite a few different orchestras and military bands and things like that when I was growing up.
So, you played music. Your mom worked at the school. What was school like for you? Was that a kind of a rough period, or?
That was hell. Yeah, that was not pleasant for anyone. I mean, you've got a really bad combination there. You've got your dad who's a priest, which in the UK doesn't earn you any respect whatsoever. Quite the opposite. And then you've got your mother who's teaching at that school. Yeah, it's a pretty hefty combination of fucking terrible. It really is. It was pretty harsh, actually. I think until I was probably about 13, 14 and really stopped being a pussy, essentially, and started standing up to people. School was pretty rough. I think it was for a lot of people. Most people can relate to that. But yeah, we didn't have a good time, not at all. Especially since I was pretty academic at that point. I was very focused on my studies, so that too kind of comes into play, and you just you get picked on, you get bullied, and things like that.
Did you play any sports at all, or were you just straight up like academia and music?
Nah, I was so terrible at sports, and it wasn't just down to physical fitness. Like I used to be a lot slimmer than I am now, but it was more down to the fact I'm terrible at sports because of my dyspraxia. I've got no real hand-to-eye coordination. My depth perception's really bad. Like you put me on say rounders or cricket or baseball, when we very rarely played that. UK doesn't give a damn about baseball. Yeah. But I couldn't catch a ball that was coming at me at 2 miles an hour. This thing could be traveling this slowly, and I still wouldn't be able to get it. I'd miss. I couldn't hit the ball. I couldn't kick the ball. I was terrible at football, aka soccer. So yeah, I was just awful at sports until I later on I actually started training pretty heavily to play squash. And that was something I was doing for something called the Duke of Edinburgh Award at the time, which is it's a really long process of earning this award. It takes a couple of years to get it, and involves various different things, one of which is a physical activity. So I picked up squash, and I got pretty good at that after a hell of a lot of practice.
Interesting. So, getting out of grade school and going on to college or university, is it's called over there. Did you go to university, and if so, did you graduate, and with what degree?
Yep. I graduated law.
Okay. Do you find that applies a lot to your current situation? Would you have rather gotten something else, or were you one of the guys that kind of went to college just to get a degree and say, hey, I've got a degree, because all the doors that it opens for you?
Well, I was very focused on, at that point anyway, actually going into law. But as I went through the degree, I found less and less that I was interested in it, and I was more interested in broadcasting. as I got involved with the student radio station, and I did a lot with that. I worked with them for 4 years. I ended up running the whole thing for my final year, and at that point, I realized this is enjoyable to me, and it's also a viable career path. So I'd rather pursue this. I did graduate. I got my degree, but I never bothered going into law itself. From a degree standpoint, law hasn't been amazingly useful. I mean, I've actually used it a couple of times. One in a rent dispute, and the other in a what was the other one? It was a copyright dispute, actually, a long time ago. This was many years ago now. It was actually with ThinkGeek. Come to think of it, yeah, it actually was. Yeah, it's now coming back into my head. We had this. I used to run a little like cafe press store. You know, I wasn't earning any money at the time. I needed some extra cash. I was running a cafe press store, and I came up with this. There's some stupid like WoW themed stuff at the time, and there was no images on it. It was just text. And I did a shirt that was for Epic Wang, and it was like in the purple Epic kind of thing in the square brackets. And I sold this shirt, and it sold quite a few copies. And ThinkGeek tried to basically pull a cease and desist on me for that, because they too had this one, but they'd actually put theirs out like 6 months afterwards. That, and you can't copyright words. This is a really common misconception. People think, oh, this word is copyright. No, you can trademark it, right? But trademark's an entirely different thing. Plus, it doesn't work the way that ThinkGeek evidently thought it did. But I had to write up some fairly long crap to deal with them, but that was weird. That was a long time ago, and I think ThinkGeek has probably smartened up since then. But I think the really important thing about doing law is that it teaches you how to think. That's the most important thing. They teach you how to be very analytical, and they teach you how to try and be as objective as possible and to make a critical argument. And the ability to criticize, the ability to poke holes in arguments, the ability to analyze a situation, actually be comparative as well. Because a lot of law is, how similar is this case to a case that's already happened some other time? Right. That's most of what happens with law. It's like if there's a precedent set, then that's the thing which most judges are either bound by or find very influential. So you've got to say, right, well, this situation is similar to this one because of this, this, and this, or this situation is different from this one because of this, this, and this, and that's how you're successful in court, essentially. Right. So it taught me those skills, and I think those have been really useful. I think you can apply those to pretty much anything in life.
So I'm sure your family was pretty excited that you got a law degree, and then you kind of went into the broadcasting field a little bit more heavily. Are they? What do they think about your current career path? Are they fully supportive of you, or
they are now? They weren't.
Now,
I mean, I think that it became better once I graduated, because my mother always said to me, "You can do whatever you want as long as you've got a degree to back it up."
Yeah.
Like, if you've got a degree, at least we know you can probably get a job somewhere that's not McDonald's. Hopefully. Although, considering the current state of affairs, it probably would be McDonald's. But whatever the case, my dad really wasn't supportive at all of everything that I did until I think I started making serious money doing it. And I think it's just because he didn't really realize that this was a legitimate industry. I think if I'd gone straight into radio, for instance, and just been a music DJ, I think it would have been more accepting of that. But it took a lot of work, and I think it took appearances at live events and interviews and putting out content which is actually watched by a lot of people for him to really realize that it was a legitimate career path. And I think he fully supports me now, but he was never really all that talkative. I wasn't exactly his favorite child, quite the opposite, actually. We argued a lot as I grew up. So I'm actually a lot like him, and I think that's why. A lot of people say, oh, you've got a fake accent. You listen to my dad talk, he sounds exactly like this, only about 20 years older. So, I think I took a lot of that from him. He's a very driven person. He's a workaholic, which I can definitely relate to. Yeah. He has a receding hairline, which I can definitely relate to. I think I got it earlier than he did, but there you go. But he doesn't take no for an answer. Like, he will fight for what he wants, and he doesn't give in. And he's a very authoritative person. He leads the pack all the time. He's always the most outspoken guy. He's always the guy who will happily take on an issue. He's very forward-thinking and progressive, especially considering, he's high up now in the Church of England, and he's one of the guys who's really pushing it from a progressive standpoint to be more accepting and to be more useful as an organization to help kind of rebuild decaying urban areas and things like that. That was one of his big passions. It still is. He was in the national news for doing this. They used to call him Reverend Regeneration, if you can believe that. Sounds like some kind of superhero. I think they can make a comic about that. But he was all about deprived urban areas, and that's where we grew up. We grew up in some real shitholes because he wanted to be to try and help as much as possible and actually turn the Church of England into a genuine force for good charitable work and social change rather than being a dogmatic organization that's all about condemnation and prejudice and things like that. So I can respect him a lot for that, and I think I grew up like he did, really, and I have the same kind of thoughts.
So you talk very fondly of your father. Would you say that he had the biggest influence on your childhood, or was there someone else that did?
I think he did. I don't even know if he knows it. And I don't think I even realized it till recently, because we were always at loggerheads. We were always fighting. I was always the main cause of problems within the household. All of the big family disputes would generally be my fault, or his fault, or 50-50. We'd always be the guys with the biggest arguments. But I think knowing about what he did and seeing him work and seeing the way that he refuses to back down in an argument. He flat out refuses to give in on any issue that he feels passionate about. I think that did shape me quite a lot.
Now, kind of wrapping up the childhood segment of the show, what was your favorite memory, if you could kind of quantify them all and single one out, or at least one that comes to mind right away, if that's too much?
I think I can think of a few. Most of them involved music one way or the other, and one of the biggest ones was my second ever trip abroad. My first and second trips abroad were as a result of music. They were as a result of a band that I played with. It was a military-style band. So, for those who don't know, that's often essentially woodwind, brass, percussion, sometimes something like an electric guitar or a keyboard. Never any strings, though. Hate strings. Terrible instruments. Wouldn't want them. So we played a lot of, say, film music and show tunes and military anthems. And we flew out to an island called Malta. And Malta is beautiful. It really is. It's such a beautiful place. And we flew out there to play concerts. And I think probably the most memorable one was where we actually played in the middle of a road. And they closed off the entire town, including the road, so that the whole town could come out and watch. And it was really surreal, but it was incredibly memorable. It was just such a great experience. It's not something that a lot of people, I think, really get to do. And Malta's so passionate about music and that kind of thing that the reception was fantastic. People loved what we did, and that's a really fulfilling thing.
I gotta ask, you're telling me all these stories about playing in the band and things like that. Did you... This is gonna sound really rude, but did you have fun as a child? Did you cause any mischief? Did you go out and drink at an early age with friends? Anything crazy like that, or were you just kind of straight and narrow?
It was a little bit of both, really. When I could get away with it, I definitely would drink underage. Some terrible stuff. God, the first thing I ever drank was a Smirnoff Ice, and it was this just disgusting crap. Why would I even drink that stuff? And but I think I wasn't exactly wild in any respect. Every now and again I'd go do something like that, go out with friends, mess some stuff up or whatever. But I think when I went to university, as soon as I left home at the age of 18, bang on the dot, went straight to university, that's when I kind of let loose. I remember, I'd say I remember the first 2 weeks of Freshers. No, I don't. Because we were out 13 out of 14 nights of so-called Freshers Fortnight, where essentially the guys who've just come to university, they don't have any classes. It's all about kind of orientating yourself and understanding where you are, and it's just getting wasted every single night. I got trashed. I really did. I used to drink heavily at university. I barely drink anymore, and it's probably for the best. So I would say, childhood wise, I had fun, but I wasn't the most social person ever. Certainly, I remember going over to friends' houses a lot to play video games, to play Sega Mega Drive or SNES or something like that. That was a big thing for me, and would always do that. And sometimes I'd go on bike rides and things. But I was never really out all the time with friends or playing or anything like that. That just wasn't my thing.
Can you remember the first game you played, and did you ever own any systems? You said you went over to your friend's house. Did your father let you? I mean, I guess it's
we
kind of
owned
a priestly
computers.
figure. Okay.
We owned computers. We never owned consoles. Like the first console I ever owned was a Sega Saturn, and this was way after it came out.
Okay.
And I wanted that machine. I really did. And this was like 4 or 5 years after it came out. This machine was essentially dead. But
Yeah.
because my friend had one, and he'd shown me so many amazing games like Shining Force 3,
Yeah.
Burning Rangers, Fighters Megamix, Virtua Fighter, Guardian Heroes. That's so incredibly good. I wanted one of those systems, so I got that. But I must have been... God, I must have been like 15, 16 when I got that.
Wow.
It was all home computers. And I was kind of limited in the games that I could play because... Let's go on to this story. Might as well. This because you've got to really understand the perspective, and it's
Okay.
difficult to do it from a US standpoint because you didn't have these machines. So in the UK, one of the first widely available computers was the BBC Micro Model B. Now this computer had 32 kilobytes of RAM. It had a tape drive which was external. And it was one of those computers where the keyboard was kind of built into the machine. It was a unit that you just plugged into a computer monitor or television. And it was called the BBC because it was actually manufactured by the BBC, the broadcasting company, because they were running a series on how to program in BASIC. So they wanted to get computers out into people's houses, and this was the way that they did it. Later on, there was a series of computers that were very popular in schools, incredibly popular. They were made in Britain. They were called the Acorn Archimedes. And they were a series of machines that actually ran on ARM processors. Anyone that owns a cell phone right now should know what an ARM processor is because it's in everything you own. These things are incredibly popular. Like pretty much every cell phone runs on ARM. Consoles run on ARM, things like that. But these machines they're essentially like PCs, but they ran a different operating system. And they had their own set of software, and it was pretty much behind what the PC had. So gaming, I was limited to the stuff that was made for the Acorn Archimedes, which wasn't a lot, and really kind of delayed ports. Like stuff like Heroes of Might and Magic 2 and Doom and eventually Quake. That stuff came out about 5-6 years afterwards on the Acorn machines as opposed to the PC. So I had this weird childhood where I didn't have a console, and the games that I played were games that no one else really played because they didn't have a machine that could run them. And all of the games that I played PC side were really much older titles or titles that I could emulate. These machines actually had you could buy this hardware card that was like a little PC inside of your Acorn machine. So you could actually run a PC in a window based on this little hardware card, which was a cool-ass idea. But my God, did I have difficulty getting things to work with it. You had to battle to get every game to work with it. Some games didn't have working sound. Some games had weird control problems. But I could eventually play stuff like Dungeon Keeper and Magic Carpet and Warcraft 2. That was one of my favorites. That actually ran perfectly. So I used to play a lot of Warcraft 2 when we eventually had the ability to do that. So yeah, I had a weird gaming childhood. Not the same as most, I think.
Yeah. I mentioned at the start of the show that you did some DJing at 13.
Yeah.
How did that start, and in what capacity? I mean, 13 to be able to do something like that. Were you a full-fledged DJ? Did you have a small role? What was that like?
It was really stuff that I was doing on the computer, kind of EJing, I suppose, like very early forms of EJing before it became a big deal. And a lot of people these days use equipment that is essentially computer-driven. But
Right.
at that point, what I was really looking into, this is kind of the start of my broadcast, was online broadcasting. Now, that was 14 years ago, so there wasn't really a lot of options, honestly. I started by just using some really, really basic kind of software to broadcast to a couple of friends, and it sounded like shit. We had 33.6K dial-up modems.
Oh man, what was the bit rate on that?
I was broadcasting a 16 kbps.
Nice.
60. Yeah, it sounded like it was terrible. I might as well have been playing it through tin cans with string. It was unbelievably bad. But, however, there was a site that came out that I heard about on the radio called Live 365. Mm-hmm. And Live 365 allowed you to broadcast to larger audiences. You could broadcast like 100 people at once, which was at the time a fairly big deal. So when Live 365 went to beta, I started broadcasting on that, and I started broadcasting to people that I essentially met online in IRC channels and on newsgroup boards.
Yeah.
And we used to play a lot of web games together. There was a web game called Planetarian. I think it still exists. It actually does. Holy hell. Yeah, Planetarian still exists. This thing has been around for so long. It's on round 47. I played it when it was in round 3. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I don't think even anyone's actually playing it anymore, but it was a web-based space combat game where you got asteroids, you mined on asteroids, you built fleets, and you joined alliances and stuff, and it was incredibly basic. But because of these kind of games, that a community built up around them, and I set up my kind of little radio station to broadcast music to those people, so people could actually listen while they were playing, and it was more convenient at the time for a lot of people than downloading MP3s, because downloading an MP3 on a 33.6K modem takes forever.
Yeah.
So think about how cool it is just to be able to turn on your online radio station, just have it continually play new music at you. So that was a big deal for a lot of people back then, even in these small communities, and I think that being able to do that is what got me really interested in doing the more live stuff over actual radio waves that I was able to do while I was at university. And it gave me the confidence to do it as well, because before that I was quite shy. And I think as I got further into the genres of music that I liked at the time, which was the harder rock and metal, stuff like Maiden and Metallica and things like that, that at that point I really wanted to kind of share my musical taste with people, and as a result, I did a lot of that. I did this for years, like every single night.
That's kind of the next question. In university, it was an extreme metal music station.
It was.
Okay. What was that experience like? Did you learn anything from that you didn't learn from the other one, or?
Tons, absolutely tons, about presentation, about production as well. So I pitched this show, and the university radio station only has a limited number of slots. So I pitched a show to them that I called Extremities, yeah? And the idea was that I would put out some kind of extreme metal music. This was by their definition. Like, by a metal fan's definition, it's not extreme metal at all. But by these guys' definition, this was extreme stuff. It wasn't Metallica, and it wasn't Limp Bizkit. It was stuff they hadn't heard of. It was European stuff. And I put a demo together of this broadcast, and it had 4 pieces of music in it. One of them was Nightwish, which is an operatic... They're an operatic metal band from Finland, which at the time not a lot of people knew about. And I actually slipped a band called Mr. Bungle in there. Mr. Bungle is barely even a metal band. It's one of the projects that a guy called Mike Patton, you might know who he is, because he's been in pretty much every band ever. He was the main guy behind Faith No More, for instance, which I think people have probably heard even if they don't realize it.
Right.
And Mr. Bungle was one of his groups. I think that was actually one of the first bands that he formed. It was like straight out of high school or whatever. They formed in 1985, and they played some crazy shit. So I put that in there, and it was enough for them to say, this is interesting. And the slot we can give you is 1:30 till 3:30 in the morning on a Friday night. Is that okay with you?
Sounds about right.
You know what? Yeah, I'll take it. So, and it's like, well, we can't have anyone producing because no one will produce at that time of night. So it's like, okay, teach me how to use this 20-year-old console that you have here and all of the broadcast equipment, which is broadcasting over, like, I can't remember what the radius was. We had actually a pretty powerful transmitter at the time, so we had quite a range on it. But I operated all of that late at night in this rickety old building that was on struts and everything. I thought it was going to fall down in a mild breeze, but that was great because you had no safety net. None. Yeah. You had to get it right first time. No one was going to help you. If you screwed up, you were on air across the airwaves. If you screwed up too badly, like that could actually get the station's license revoked.
Yeah.
'Cause they're constantly checking
for crap
to
learn,
like that.
so.
Yeah, they threw me right into the fire there, and it was a great environment. I love working under pressure. I really do. I find it exhilarating. So, yeah, that was great, and I think that really set the scene for what I did later.
Was it a conservative university at all, or was it? I mean, how hard was it for them to let you play metal music at the time where it probably wasn't as, I guess, widely accepted as it is today?
That's not an issue in the UK.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
I hear all sorts of things about US establishments, like, oh, this is a liberal college. I'm like, what?
Okay.
There's nothing like that in the UK. Universities are they're just universities. They don't have a political leaning, really.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that was a non-issue for us. We could do whatever, we were also past the watershed at that point. The UK has something called the watershed rule, which means past a certain time at night, a lot of the rules for broadcasting cease to apply. Because since we're only on one time zone, we can kind of get away with this.
Yeah.
So past about 9 o'clock, you don't expect basically kids to be awake listening to it, which I think is a ridiculous idea because they probably are. But that were the rules. It was the same. It's the same with television as well because we have 5 television stations in the UK that everybody gets, and 2 of them are paid for by the taxpayers. So they're regulated. But after about 9 o'clock, you can do pretty much whatever you want. Like, we're talking like nudity, possibly even full frontal nudity, a lot of swearing, violence, hardcore topics. That stuff is okay past about 9 or 10 o'clock. They may have changed it since I last paid attention to it, but yeah, the university had no problem with it. Not a problem at all.
So, stepping away from the music, but we'll actually be coming kind of right back to broadcasting. What was the first time that when was the first time that you played World of Warcraft, and what release of the game was it in vanilla, and also was that your first kind of MMO or dealing with that style of game?
It wasn't my first MMO, and it wasn't really even my first online RPG. I started playing online RPGs when they didn't have graphics. I started playing during the period where mods were very popular, and you needed a telnet connection for that. I played a hell of a lot of multi-users in Middle-earth, which was a really difficult game. This game was purely text-based. It was based in Middle-earth, and it was pretty damn hardcore, to the point where player killing was rampant, because it was designed for that. You had 2 factions. You had, the forces on Mordor, and you had the good guys. And they had a tendency of killing each other. And there was a real sense of fear in that, because if you'd ventured out too far, you could suddenly run into an enemy player, and then trying to escape that enemy player without losing everything you own, because you could be fully looted and everything like that. You'd even lose experience at some point for actually doing that. That was a really tense kind of style of gameplay. It was quite exciting, and there's not a lot of games that really support that sort of thing anymore. But the first MMO I actually played was PlanetSide, the original PlanetSide by Sony, and that was a revelation because I'd never played anything like that. FPS with that kind of size, nothing really, and it's still nothing really does it.
Yeah.
So that for me was such a great time, and I spent a good few years on that. And when World of Warcraft came out in the EU, we'd had our fill of PlanetSide, and PlanetSide had some really bad changes that we didn't like, such as the battle frame robotics, which kind of ruined the game. So we bailed on it, and we went to World of Warcraft as a group. Like our group from PlanetSide went to play WoW, and we started playing on day 1 of EU launch.
What was it about World of Warcraft, in your opinion, that not only drew you to it, but kept you playing for probably more than most games in your life?
Well, leveling up, I actually quit the game on no less than 5 occasions. I kid you not. Because I found I couldn't do it. Like, the questing was boring. It really wasn't engaging at all. And the only thing that kept me going were the people I was playing with. And I think that's a very common experience for a lot of people. Right. Questing in WoW at the time, it was praised by the reviewers as this is revolutionary because this is not grinding. Yeah, this is doing quests. It's not the same thing. Now we consider that style of questing really to be grinding because it's like collect 10 bear asses and you get experience, then you do the same thing in some other area. But because of the people I was playing with, I kept going. And what really hooked me in at that point was when we started raiding. When we first went into Molten Core, and all 40 of us were on TeamSpeak, and we were trying to take on, at the time, Luciferon, which was the first boss of Molten Core.
Good old Lucy.
Yeah, which, when you think back about it now, the mechanics weren't even remotely difficult.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was like, we couldn't fucking deal with it. Holy shit. Like, we didn't have enough decurses. We couldn't decurse fast enough. Decursive didn't exist at that point. We had to manually decurse. We didn't have any mods to help. It was a nightmare. And it took us ages to finally beat Lucifron, but it's still burned into my mind when we first downed Lucifron of how happy everyone was on TeamSpeak. Everyone was going crazy. It was a great feeling. We're like, oh my god, this loot. Wowhead didn't exist at that point. We didn't even know what to expect. We're seeing epics. We hadn't seen those. So that was a huge thing, and raiding at that point hooked me in to the point where that's all I wanted to do. And I went from guild to guild in various different capacities, either hardcore raiding with guilds like Lefe, or some more casual raiding with smaller guilds. I actually went to some guilds just to help them kind of lead raids, because I loved doing it. It was great fun. It was the thing which I loved the most, and it was actually the only thing that really kept me playing WoW for that long. Raiding was my sole passion in that game.
It's hard for me not to kind of splooge with the exact same feelings, because that
you can relate.
Yeah, I can relate completely, but that's not what we're here for. So, talk to me about WoW Radio. Where did this idea come from, just to start off with?
Well, WoW Radio wasn't actually founded by me. There's a misconception going around that people think that I made that station. It's not really true. There was a guy by the name of Athelus who set it up initially. Now, this ties in interestingly to eSports, because one of the first people he had on the staff was DJ Wheat, which is very curious for a lot of people.
DJ Wheat was involved in that motherfucker.
WoW Radio.
That motherfucker.
Yep. He was involved in WoW Radio for a very short period of time before he went to Radio ITG. Okay. Like, at the time, Radio ITG was actually big competition for us. They stole a lot of our staff. They essentially almost destroyed the radio station. The reason I got into it was because Athelus went on a huge recruitment drive after most of their staff bailed and went to Radio ITG. And I joined up at that point. I saw it and I'm like, this sounds interesting. And they're like, we're looking for DJs for talk, and we're also looking for DJs for music. And at that point, I was like, I could do music. So I started doing essentially a form of my show on Extremities, but I renamed it Iron Forged. And I did Iron Forge like every Tuesday on WoW Radio. And it was really popular, and within the first week, Athelus turns around and said to me, do you want to do a talk show? Like, I've never really done a talk show before. I don't know really what to do with it. And I looked at the other talk shows that were on there at the time. And I thought, well, okay, I could probably do something. Maybe I could come up with some features for it and make it nice and special and hopefully do something that's a little bit better than what they've currently got. And I came up with the idea for a show called Blue Please. At the time, Blue Please, you probably remember this on the forums. Blue Please was like the thing which people used to post when they wanted attention from a community manager. Yeah, because they posted in blue. That was their color. So Blue Please was what they said. That's now banned. You can't say that anymore. Because people because the mods were like, fuck this. This is terrible. You stop saying it right now. But yeah, I called it Blue Please, and the point was to discuss current community hot topics and try and provide a little bit of a different perspective, and also to go a little bit crazy, kind of shock jockey. You know, I looked at a lot of the American radio shows, the shock jock stuff, to a lesser degree Howard Stern, but to a greater degree the political things, like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and what the hell's his name? I can't remember. That idiot that does Pinheads and Patriots. Who's that?
I try to stay.
He's the guy that did the whole "fuck it, we'll do it live."
Oh, well, you keep talking. I'll Google it.
Yeah, I can't remember. Bill O'Reilly.
There you go.
That was his name. Yeah, I'd heard those, and like, because I'd never really been to the States at that point, I found the whole thing hilarious. Like, the very idea that people could talk that way. It's like, this is comedy, right? You're not serious about this stuff, right? So I started Blue Please, and I thought, this is comedy. You know, I'm going to go extreme on a lot of this stuff, and I'm going to say, look, don't take these opinions seriously, because they're designed to make you think a bit, but more to the point, they're designed to kind of over-exaggerate the issue in an entertaining manner. It's a rant show. And I had 3 features in this show that I came up with. I actually started a Q&A segment called Ask the Murloc, where I'd put on this stupid-ass English accent, and I would answer questions from the community, but I'd essentially just insult them and make up answers that were really, really misleading. And that was a fairly popular segment, to the point where later on, we ended up starting a radio play based around this guy. We actually did an improv radio play. He turned into a fully fledged character. Also did something called Nubcake News, which was this parody segment, and I did this stupid, I don't even know why I did this. I can't imagine what possessed me, but I thought, I'm going to do a section where I take posts from the forums and I try and rap them. And I'm like, why the fuck would you do that?
Sounds a little bit Sean Elliott from GFW Radio.
Yeah, that sounds about right, actually. And I mean, this was back in 2004, so this was a long-ass time ago. But we launched that show, and it did really, really well. Really well. To the point where we moved the show 2 weeks later to actually go up against Radio ITG. We went up against a show, I think it was Out of Mana, actually, which was hosted by Wax Steve, who you also know, Wax Steven.
Yeah.
He's on Kings of Tin with DJ Wee. And I think it was hosted by a girl called Pixie D as well. She had the shrillest, most irritating voice I have ever heard in my life. Apparently, she's probably still around. She's probably a very nice person, so I'm very sorry. But my God, was she irritating at that point. Jesus, why? But whatever the case, that show had to, move as a result because there was a very limited audience for live broadcast, and we blew everything else out of the water at that stage. It was really popular, and it went really, really well. I think it was after BlizzCon 2005 where we went to broadcast. Athelis left the station to go and work for Blizzard as a GM. And he handed the station over to me at that point, and I took over and I ran it ever since, up until 2010 when we wound it up.
At its peak, how big was the shows, the website? If you know numbers, but kind of relating it today, was it the biggest and best in the scene?
It was, yeah. In terms of just raw numbers, it was. In terms of versus podcast, the only podcast that really competed with us at that time was The Instance. Yeah, the Instance with Scott Johnson. His was probably competitive with Blue Please in terms of numbers, I would say. But we had a lot of shows. We didn't just do one podcast, we did 10. Right. We had 10 different shows, and we constantly rotated them out. And live-wise, nobody could touch us at that stage. They really couldn't. And it doesn't even sound that impressive, but at that time, we were getting anywhere between 500 and 1,000 concurrents on our Shoutcast server, but audio only. That time, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. Video streaming couldn't happen. That technology just wasn't there yet. So, yeah, it wasn't bad. I think we had about 150,000 unique listeners every month at our peak. And that was, for us, that was a huge deal.
What was your favorite show to do out of all those?
It was probably a show called Epic. That was after, I think, season 1 or season 2? I think it was season 1 of Blue Please, after I wound Blue Please up, because I didn't really want to do that format anymore. Mm-hmm. I started a show with a guy who, at the time, was known as Kiki Jiki. He was a hardcore raider in the community. We actually moved in together, as roommates for a while to do this show, because we happened to be down in the same area anyway. He was at university down in Sheffield. I'd just graduated, so I just moved down to Sheffield to work. So we all moved into the same house. We did the show from there, and we did a duo show. It was the same kind of thing as Blue Please, but I had a counterfoil, so it was much, much better discussion-wise. We'd have good arguments, we'd joke around an awful lot, it was a lot of fun, and we adapted the series, Nubcake News, to incorporate more characters, because he was there and he could do some voice acting. And we also did Ask the Murloc as a radio play. And this ran for 2 seasons. It was an improv radio play. We figured out where we wanted to start and where we wanted to end, and then we ad-libbed the whole thing in stupid voices. He did this Russian accent. He was playing a character called the Soviet Murloc, and I was playing the Murloc who had this terrible British accent. And we did an improv series for I think it was 26 episodes of this thing, and it got progressively more ridiculous as we went on. It was stupid. It was totally stupid, but it was so much fun to do. And I remember we just had to stop the recording every now and again because we were laughing too much. We were just keeling over in laughter because we'd said some stupid thing, then realized what we'd said and just collapsed in fits. That was awesome. I miss those times. I really do.
Was how profitable was all this? Were you making a decent living from it all, or no?
Nope, not at all. That station barely broke even. We had to support that with our own jobs. I was working down. I worked at a game store at the time, and Kiki was at university. But a lot of our staff actually worked at stores, and we put our own money into it. Eventually, we got enough advertising to break even, and maybe buy a little bit of equipment or pay for one flight to BlizzCon, for instance, for someone that really couldn't afford it themselves. But it was a fan site. We tried to run it as a business, but you'd be surprised at the time how difficult it was to get sponsors. We had maybe 2 sponsors that were really good, and we got ripped off by one of them. We advertised a game called The Spoils, and it was a card game. And I was big into trading card games at the time, and it was a really cool game. It was really funny. It was like it still exists, but it was kind of a comedy TCG. It had some really funny references in it, and we supported the hell out of that. And we put together like a package for them to make some money. And at the end of the day, the company went bust, and they went bust owing us about $4,000, which at the time for us that was a huge deal. That could have like supported us for a year, and we were out a lot of money as a result of that, and it was really horrible. So yeah, we struggled a lot. We struggled especially when we put Google advertising on the site, but Blizzard said you have got to block all gold selling ads. You can't.
Oh,
you
what?
cannot block. You
Dude,
can't.
that was when
It's
like
impossible.
gold selling ads made a ton of money. Like
Yeah. Like there were so many. We
That was
had a
in the
blacklist
beginning,
that was thousands of sites long, and we couldn't get rid of them all.
Man.
We actually got axed from the fan site program after that.
No wonder
Like,
you
at
guys
that
weren't
point-
profitable, man.
Yeah, it was horrible. So we had 2 choices: either we get axed from the fan site program and blacklisted by Blizzard, or we actually break even and don't have to pay for the site ourselves. So we end up getting blacklisted eventually.
Do you remember to go
terrible.
off on a tangent? Do you remember whataboutpp.com?
Yeah, I do.
So they made a killing from those from the gold selling ads. So
Yeah.
that was a shame you guys couldn't run it.
Uh-huh.
Funny enough, the guys that run that website now work for Blizzard. So
Typical.
can you find these shows online now? Or,
Yeah, you can. We still have an archive, actually. We maintained it when we split up. And basically, the archives are over at wcradio.com, which was the old address. We have it hosted on a legacy server. It's got access to most of the stuff that we used to do. I think, I'm not sure if we still got access to... Yeah, I think we do. All of my Blue Please episodes are still up on cynicalbread.com. Most of them, anyway. They're still available. So it is possible to dig up those really old shows.
Now, what made you said you stopped in 2010. Was there a reason for you stopping? Was it just...
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what was that reason?
Drama. Bullshit drama. So, for years, we struggled with internal drama. Think about what would happen if you've got a lot of volunteer DJs all in the same room. Like, after about 5 minutes, would they be trying to kill each other? Probably. It's a lot of egos in a very small space. And as a result, we had a hell of a lot of internal conflict and weird-ass drama. Like, we had this joke, like, the girls ruin WoW Radio. Every time we brought female staff in, drama would happen. Something would happen. It usually wasn't the staffers' fault, although occasionally when it was really bad. But it was because we had a lot of socially awkward nerds on staff, and some weird, creepy, possessive shit was happening. It really was. So we had all sorts of crazy drama within WoW Radio. And after, I think it was, the last BlizzCon that we did before everything split up, which I think was there a BlizzCon in 2009? Or was it 2000? There was a BlizzCon 2009.
I think that was the first one I went to, actually.
Yeah, it was BlizzCon 2009. We went to that, and we tried to cover it as best we could. It didn't go all that well, because it was at this point that Blizzard had really turned on the commercialization of that con. Mm-hmm. The first one, 2005, we were actually official broadcasters of. That was like one of our crowning moments. But then, of course, they got in people like DirecTV that could do pay-per-view stuff and actually make a lot of money out of it, and the fan sites got shut out. It's like, you can't film anything, you can't broadcast anything, you're really limited to what interviews you can get, and that BlizzCon went really badly. We lost quite a lot of money, and there was a big schism in people that thought they could run the website better, and people that were kind of loyal to me. And after a lot of internal bullshit, it was eventually decided the best way to do it was to let the guys who thought they could run it better run off on their own and do their own thing, and to shut the whole thing down. So we splintered into 3 sites. We splintered into cynicalbrit.com, which was me. It was just me. I decided just to go solo, because at that point my shows were the most popular of anyone, so I thought, you know what, I can just do this solo. I don't need anyone else. So I did a solo thing. It split into VTW Productions, which is... This is the good one. Like, these were the talented guys. Basically, all the talent went to VTW. There's a couple of guys called Octail and Hordak. They are some of the most talented DJs. They are so very good. I don't even think they do their show anymore, which is extremely upsetting because they were great. And all of those guys, they went off to do VTWProductions.com. Then the younger guys, most of the guys who were causing all the drama, this does tie into StarCraft, by the way. So it's a long story, but it will eventually tie into StarCraft. They went off to set up something called OMFG.FM, Original Media for Gamers. And they even stole this name from me. I came up with this concept years before. Like, we were aiming to transition out of WoW Radio into something more generally gaming-oriented that wasn't tied to WoW, and it's going to be this big kind of shared community media source called Original Media for Gamers, where people could upload their own podcasts and videos, and you could share them around, and you could rate them, and you could help each other make really good shows. They went to create that, got hyper-competitive, were really dramatic about everything. You know, everything they tried to do was to try and beat the other two organizations, and they failed hard. And as a result, the site's essentially dead now. There's no one using it. It's a wasteland.
Yeah.
So that was the unceremonious end of WoW Radio. But the reason this ties into StarCraft is because when the beta started, they started doing a live show every Friday that was broadcasting games. And they had some people play for them that you know today. Like LZ Gamer used to play for them every week, for instance.
I think I remember that, actually.
Yeah, maybe you did. Because for maybe a week or two, it was actually quite popular. Yeah. Until people realized the commentators were absolutely clueless. They were just really bad.
Yeah.
And the players stopped showing up. And at the time, I wanted to start doing a StarCraft show as well. So I came up with an idea called Shoutcraft, and I talked to one of DJ Wheat's, I think it was one of DJ Wheat's old co-hosts by the name of Emperor. He's still around, I think, but he doesn't do an awful lot in the scene anymore. And I said to him, let's do a commentary show. And let's do something, and we'll call it Shoutcraft, and we'll focus on really high-quality stuff, building this really small stable of players. Things like that. We had some really cool ideas at the time. They didn't pan out all that well, but we eventually had this big war because we deliberately scheduled it at the same time. It was always on a Friday against the other guys. We competed for viewers. At the time, Team Liquid actually used Project Wonderful advertising, so you could buy an ad. We had bidding wars over Team Liquid's ads. At the top, it was changing every 5 minutes because like Shoutcraft on Fridays or OMFG eSports Live on Fridays, and yeah, it was pretty crazy for a while. It really was. My God, I'm actually looking at the old thread here, and I'm seeing 840 Kim Taeyeon versus Atero.
Wow.
Holy shit. That takes me back a while.
Wow.
Good Lord.
To kind of take a step backwards, after WoW Radio ended, you went on to kind of start your YouTube channel. Why then? Did you have a secret book to like predict the future and realize that it was going to be the biggest thing in 2012 or 2011 that would be the most profitable thing? Or what kind of drew you to the YouTube world?
Well, I'd done videos before that, but only on a sort of casual basis. And I did a couple of videos in World of Warcraft that were the Chronicles of the Gold Farmer series that were quite popular. And I did a Let's Play for Something Awful, which is, everyone knows what Something Awful is. I mean, fuck. If you don't know what Something Awful is, you're doing something horribly wrong. But they had a really great forum for Let's Plays, and it was really high quality. Like, they would just put you through the ringer if you put out shit content. So it was a great place to really learn how to put out some good quality commentary. And at that point, it was kind of just a hobby, and it had always been running through my mind, is podcasting ever going to be profitable? And having experienced several years of WoW Radio, my answer was nope. Yeah. It's not going to be profitable, basically, unless you're Revision 3, and even then, it's probably not going to happen. And podcasting is kind of going to be an ancillary thing that's used to support your site and promote your other material. It's not going to be used as your source of income because you're not going to make any money off it. You just can't do it. So I was thinking for the longest time, how could I transition into video? But I never really had the opportunity to put out something on a regular basis. Because, of course, video it's very time-consuming. It takes a lot of effort. And I was working a full-time job at the time, so there's no way in a million years I could actually afford to put out regular videos. Plus, you couldn't make any money off them. At the time, YouTube was like, nope, can't make any money off game videos. Nope, absolutely not. And of course, the only people that were able to do it just before the game station started up was Machinima. And that's why Machinima is as big as they are, because they had a monopoly over it for years. And they're essentially as in bed with YouTube as you could possibly get. So if you weren't a part of Machinima, who I didn't want to be a part of, because back when Machinima actually used to be a Machinima site, when Machinima.com was a legit Machinima site, I had friends that worked with them and they had some really bad experiences. I don't even know if this was true or not, but I heard that one of them actually ended up getting groped at BlizzCon by a staff member and told not to tell anyone. I shit ye not. This was a long time ago, though, and I don't even know how true that was, so take it with a pinch of salt. She had some interesting ideas about the truth. But whatever the case, I didn't want to be involved with them because I had a really bad taste in my mouth from dealing with them previously. So I couldn't monetize my videos or anything. But how I actually got into making videos as a profit was when I lost my job. I was working for a financial advisory. The recession hit. They cut half the staff, including me. And I was like, shit, I'm in a really bad place. I only got 2 months of severance pay because apparently I was about a month before I would have gotten a full package. Fucking twats. They did it on purpose, obviously. But I was like, right, I'm in a lot of trouble. I've got to make money. I need to pay my rent. I need to pay my wife's rent. So obviously at the time I was still stuck outside of the US, and no doubt we'll come onto that later, but I thought, you know what I'll do? The Cataclysm beta is just starting up right now. The NDA's been lifted. Why don't I focus my efforts on making videos, and I'll use my experience in doing talk radio to try and make some really good commentary videos, the kind that people haven't been able to make up to this point. And what I'll do is I'll use it to drive traffic to cynicalbrit.com, and I'll make ad revenue. And it was a really indirect way of doing it, but at the time, of course, I couldn't monetize.
Right.
And it got massive. It exploded. It was absurd. I had no idea it was going to get that popular, but essentially there were 3 groups, maybe 4, really competing for Cataclysm coverage, and I was blowing them all out of the water at that point. I was getting it faster. I was doing it better. I had better editing, better quality videos, better quality microphone, and I was nailing it. I really was. And it was at that time that Husky was starting up the game station and invited me to be a part of that. And that's when, at least once I started getting the first paychecks and realized, holy shit, this is legit, that I turned it into a full-time career.
For my own personal reasons, was MMO Champion a big facilitator, or was that a competitor for you when it comes to your videos and the growth of them?
Bit of column A, bit of column B. Like, MMO Champion was useful, but it wasn't where the lion's share of my actual views came from. Okay. These videos were viral. Like, people would be posting these in trade chat. People would be posting them in Barons chat, guild chat, every forum, everywhere. Like, BB from MMO Champion likes to think he's extremely important. I've had some bad experiences with him in the past. He's a bit of a dick. Admittedly, he's also French, so maybe that's why. But he is a dick because if he doesn't feel like he's in control of absolutely everything, he freaks out. And at the time, he was posting videos from me, he was posting videos from OMFG Catter, Jesse Cox, who I'm great friends with, and occasionally videos from Yogscast, who you also know. And he was always weird. He really was. He would do things like this because I think he felt like it made you feel very, very grateful to him. He liked to have everyone know how powerful he was. And of course, he's nowhere near as influential anymore, and you can see by the views that they get on their videos that it's nowhere near as impressive. But it was after that he made certain demands of me, and I basically said to him, well, no. And he said, well, I'll cut you off. I won't post your videos anymore. I was like, I don't give a shit. You're giving about 15% of my traffic at most, and about 2% of my actual revenue. Because a lot of people don't seem to realize this. When you embed a video, it doesn't play a pre-roll ad. Right. That's where the most of your money comes from. So actually, embeds are not very useful. Like, having your video embedded by a big site sounds exciting, but in reality, it doesn't benefit you all that much. And we were showing on our statistics that we weren't getting any subscribers from MMO Champion at all. They were all coming from different locations. So, like, fuck it, he likes to think he's more important than he really is, and it's unfortunate that we ended up kind of coming to loggerheads on that. But at the end of the day, he's a really hard person to work with. So, what can you do?
Yeah. Well, let's kind of talk, kind of switch gears and talk about StarCraft 2. So, we kind of know how you got into the scene and how it started off back in the beta. But when you first started off in StarCraft 2 and you started really making a name for yourself in the scene, the community as well as some community figureheads, which we'll talk about as the next question, were pretty vocal about your involvement in the scene in a negative light, and you were actually pretty vocal about your thoughts on that also in a negative light. Why did you respond the way you did, and how much did it affect you, both personally and both with your kind of work?
Well, I think that it always makes you feel terrible if you work hard on something and people treat you like shit. There's no real question about that, and I think anyone that's ever worked in the scene or in anything that has any kind of contact with the public knows how bad that is. When it comes to how I responded and why I responded, because at the end of the day, at that time, and I kind of still am like this, I have a background in getting really involved in stuff like news groups and forums and things like that. I started posting on news groups when I was like 10 years old, and I get into fights then. It's a really hard habit to break, and I also don't like backing down. I don't like being picked on by people. I don't like people who tell lies about me, and I'll go after them. I'll attack them. I'll happily get in the mud with them, even though now I realize that probably wasn't the best idea. But at the end of the day, I felt like what I was doing was the right thing to do, and I was willing to aggressively defend it, and I was willing to try and change people's minds, if necessary, by shouting them down and just saying, look, you're fucking wrong about this, you're an idiot, you're hurting the scene with your attitude, you're being really closed-minded, you're being incredibly arrogant, so step off.
Now, talking a little bit more about the quote-unquote figureheads, Idra and In Control, and I want to say it was on State of the Game, were pretty vocal about your involvement, and probably two of the loudest at the time, in a very negative fashion, mind you. What is your relationship with them now? And when that first started, you were pretty vocal about it publicly, but did you ever talk to them privately? And how long did that take to happen?
Well, now I'm cool with both of them. I actually met Jeff for the first time at MLG Anaheim, although I had talked to him quite a lot online before that happened. And we're totally cool. Like, the hatchet was buried a long time ago with Jeff. Even further back, actually, with Idra, because the conflicts I had with Idra were really just on the Team Liquid forums. I think I was mentioned by him on State of the Game at one point, but nowhere near as much as In Control used to. In Control would bring me up at every chance he possibly could. He put on that stupid-ass Australian accent. Jesus Christ. It was so bad. But, he just wouldn't stop with it.
Yeah.
Whereas Idra really stayed more reserved after the first kind of couple of attacks. We argued really hard on the forums. It was vicious. We both got banned for it several times. And it was mostly, I went after Idra the first time because he went after Husky. And I don't know what his relationship with Husky is now, but back then it was bad.
Yeah.
Because Idra was of the belief that Husky would only commentate replays of Idra where Idra lost, and especially where Idra raged. Now, of course, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to say that Husky is unsure about Idra, but as far as I know, Greg has no problems with it. Greg's actually smartened up. He's not an idiot anymore, and I think EG and Alex have a lot to do with that. So, sorry, continue on, though. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, so the thing about that was, of course, that it's bullshit, because Idra's not going to release replays where he loses, and actually Idra didn't release replays at all at that time. So the only replays you could ever get of Idra where Idra lost. I remember the first time I ever cast Idra, I actually cast Idra versus Silver, and that was on Shoutcraft, and he lost there and he raged. And this would be why Silver posted this. As, of course, any player that beats Idra, especially at that time, they're proud of it, and if he rages, they definitely want people to see that. Because, of course, it's in their best interest for people to see him as kind of a figure of fun, as opposed to a legitimate competitive player. So I think that Idra at the time believed that Husky was doing that, and also Idra was really not happy about the amount of money that Husky was making out of casting other players, and I think I also kind of got caught in the crossfire there. Not only because I defended Husky, but because there was the perception at the time that I jumped onto StarCraft 2 in order to make a lot of money, which is not the case at all. And that stuck around for a while, mostly because of Jeff, actually. And because Jeff kept perpetuating that. Idra dropped it very quickly. Jeff didn't.
Well, alongside Jeff and Idra, someone that as far as I know, you can of course correct me, still kind of has, I guess, an issue with you is the best way to put it. Too Good, James Harding. Of course, we did a real talk with him already, but I know you guys have shared some instances with one another, and not in a very good way. I think a couple of them were at DreamHack. In person, and also just publicly, he is usually the one kind of flinging shit your way. Is that relationship still kind of fragmented and broken, or have you guys spoken about it? Is it just for the public to see you guys like that, and you're actually good friends? What is that whole thing about?
We're not good friends. Like, I think the term frenemy is probably the best way to describe it. Like, in private, we'll hang around with each other, no problem. The funny thing about Valencia, which is the what you're talking about, is there's two main instances that I know of. If there's been any more, then I have no idea about that, mostly because I don't really pay attention to what Too Good broadcasts. But with Valencia, he was hired on as a host. Me and Apollo were commentating, and he had a co-host, with a female co-host. And before the event, we were hanging around with Robert from DreamHack, and we were totally cool. No problems whatsoever. But when he gets his host face on, he generally hosts by telling jokes, and a lot of his humor is at the expense of everyone around him. So he ripped on the female co-host a lot, and she couldn't really deal with it all that well. Not a lot of people can. If you'll say anything about Too Good, it's that he's quick-witted. Yeah. He's difficult to banter with. But this is what Too Good really hates, in my experience, is that anyone that basically gives as good as he gets. It got really bad during Valencia because he tossed a few things my way, but then I tossed a few things back his way, which the crowd seemed to appreciate quite a lot. He didn't like that, at least from what I could tell. And Too Good doesn't have any limits. I think anyone that's ever met Too Good knows he has no limits. He will not stop, and he will go as far as he thinks he needs to essentially win, whatever that means. And in that case, what he did was he basically made a joke on stage about paying my wife for sex. Yeah? And at that point, I was kind of caught off by it because we were going through a really rough spot. We'd been apart for years. It's pretty damn hard to maintain a relationship like that.
Yeah.
We were arguing on a daily basis. We were fighting a lot. Most of it was my fault. But we were in a really tough spot. And that caught me. That was like a blind side for me. I was like, whoa, okay, I don't have a comeback for that because I was just so surprised by it. It created a really awkward moment in the cast, and people started posting a lot on Team Liquid. Now, I posted after that to say, oh, it's not a big deal, we're all friends, it's just banter, relax. It's not. I mean, that was actually really, really hurtful at the time. But at this point, I don't really give a shit. But at the time, it really caught me off. And I think that maybe people have this idea that I don't like Too Good after that. I think that Too Good does a lot of stupid shit. And Too Good, for the most part, runs his mouth for the purposes of attention. I don't really know why that is, but he's got a bit of a history. You probably know this because you were big into WoW. He was big into WoW at the time. He used to run a show called WoW Wednesdays on ESL. Yep. He had a co-host, Matt Ryder, and he used to rip on Matt to the point where Matt got really unhappy with it, and people didn't want to work with James. And this is kind of why I'm surprised that people want to work with him now. I mean, I've worked with him at events, and I'm still trying to figure out what exactly it is he does. I know he's obviously doing an awful lot of important things behind the scenes, but he's never visibly really doing anything. Neither his brother either, because he brought his brother in, Hollywood. Well, that's not his real name, but he refers to himself as that. That's an interesting name to have, but this comes from a guy who calls himself TotalBiscuit. I think that we can let him go. But he brought his brother in, and I'm not really sure what he does either. I think it's mostly because I'm on stage like 12, 14 hours a day. I don't see what he does, so I assume he keeps getting brought back to these events, so he must do something important. But I'm not 100% convinced as to what his role really is at the moment in the scene. Now that he's set up his studio and he's actually doing shows and things like that, it makes more sense. But around that time, when he was kind of hobnobbing with DreamHack for Valencia and things like that, I was really confused. It's like, why are you here again? It's like, do you even know the names of the units? And at that point, he didn't. You know, it's like, why would you bring him in to host that event? He created some really awkward moments during Valencia, and the crowd really didn't like it. So I don't think he did a particularly good job there. I think he's got a lot better at it lately, though. The other instance that people see is that Fuck TotalBiscuit video, which is on YouTube. Now, this is actually him getting really annoyed and frustrated. I didn't hear this at all. We were both at this event in Italy called the Ultimate Gaming Championship. It was run by Sturmy, who most people should know. If you don't, really damn good Quake player. One of the most famous in the world. So they brought Too Good, and they brought Joe in. Yeah, Joe Miller, for commentary for Quake. And they brought me and Apollo in for commentary for StarCraft. Their setup sucked. They had us really close together. Really damn dumb idea. And they gave Joe Miller and Too Good dynamic microphones. So you could hear me clearly on the Quake stream. And Too Good got really pissed off. And he tried to do this kind of impersonation of me, thinking it would get me to stop. I couldn't hear him. I was wearing like Sennheiser headphones, and I was commentating the game, and I couldn't hear him. I wasn't paying any attention. He just got progressively more annoyed and eventually said, "Fuck TotalBiscuit." And this video ended up going up on YouTube. I didn't even hear about it till afterwards. He didn't even mention it at all at the event to me. So, like, for that, I don't really give a shit. But I wouldn't describe our relationship as good by any stretch. We haven't really had a lot of positive interactions, but I don't hate the guy.
Yeah.
You know, he puts out some good shows, and he's been doing a hell of a lot more with things that are, I suppose, substantial with esports, rather than just being this kind of shady behind-the-scenes figure that seems to have his fingers in an awful lot of pies. He's doing things which actually make sense, like he's being an interviewer, he's hosting little shows on the couch, he's doing his roundtable stuff, he's doing stuff from his studio, he's doing the arenas. Cool. Sounds good. I don't really have a problem with that.
All right. Well, kind of moving on, have you learned, or maybe not learned, but do you deal with the community and basically when someone flings shit your way, do you still react the same way, or have you kind of changed your way and keep it to yourself these days?
I keep a lot more to myself than I used to. Like, I used to respond to everything I saw. If I saw it and read it, I'd respond to it. There's a lot of shit now that I can just ignore. I think at the time I just felt compelled to really defend myself because I maybe wasn't as prominent in the community as I am now or whatever. Maybe just hadn't taken my lumps, gone through the shit that a lot of people had to go through.
Right.
And at the time I just felt, I've got to respond because otherwise I'll be seen as weak. And it's about, like, kind of, if someone hits you, you hit them back twice as hard. That was something, you know, that I learned kind of in my teenage years and my childhood, and it stopped people picking on me. I assumed the same thing would work online. It doesn't really. I think that you can build up quite a fan base and you can humiliate somebody in a war of words. And the idea of feeding the trolls is not necessarily accurate all the time. Sometimes people are just posting to get a reaction. But I think other times people really genuinely believe what they're saying and they want to post it and they want to see people support them. Yeah? They want their comment to get upvotes. If they say something shitty about TotalBiscuit, they want that to be upvoted because then they feel the sense of, I'm not the only one that thinks this. You know? Does anyone else? Am I the only one? I mean, some of the two most popular bullshit phrases on Reddit. And I think that when you knock them down with a really good counter-argument, really good, you know, banter, flame, or whatever, and you get upvoted and they get downvoted, they feel like shit for it. And that's a good way of punishing them. But in reality, I think now these days, a lot of those kind of guys either have wised up and don't post that way on Reddit anymore or just aren't involved. And a lot of the new kind of trolls that we get are just, they are there just to try and get a reaction out of you. So once I realized that, I started ignoring them. I'll still post things every now and again. If someone posts something blatantly wrong about me, I'll try and correct them, but I won't do it in a more aggressive way than I used to. I won't shout at them for it. I won't try and look defensive. I'll just say, well, you're not really right there, and then just post a bunch of facts. It's like, let the community make of it what they will.
What do you, just broad stroke question, what do you think about the community right now?
That is a broad stroke question because I think the community in itself is actually a misnomer. It's not a very good term to use because the wider community actually consists of several communities. Like, there's Reddit, and there's Team Liquid, and there's a small community of one Well Played, for instance, and then there's communities that are based around, say, IRC. Like, the guys who post on Team Liquid IRC, for instance, are not necessarily the same guys that post on the forums. And actually, their behavior is pretty shitty. And I stopped going to Team Liquid IRC because some of the people in there are fucking idiots. We've still got the old Brood War fanboy / trolls that refuse to... And every day they're arguing about how Brood War was so much better, blah, blah, blah. We've got people that are just constantly hating on players and stuff like that. And then you've got these other groups of people that never get involved in these communities, like people that will just watch Husky videos or just watch HD or Psy or me, that will never be involved in any of these forums. So what is the wider community? I don't think one really exists. It's so fragmented, and each one has its own problems. Team Liquid lately's been getting a little bit shitty. The LR threads have always been bad, but I don't think they've ever been this bad. There's some really terrible stuff going on, especially when it comes to Koreans versus foreigners. I want to tear my hair out at that. We've got people that are unnecessarily elitist about things. It's like, I can't appreciate games by foreigners anymore. It's like, I just want to walk up to someone like that and punch them in the nose. I really do. I want to see them bleed because it's so stupid. It's like, my God, you don't care about esports. You don't support people. It's like, I come from Newcastle, where if you didn't support the Newcastle Football Club, you were an outcast. And it didn't matter if they were losing or not. You supported Newcastle. If they were in the Premier League, if they were in the First Division, you supported them because that was your club. It was local heroes. And to me, foreigners are exactly the same thing. I could definitely appreciate the high-level games from Koreans without question. And there's loads of Korean players that I really like watching and I adore casting. But to say that it's not enjoyable to watch foreigners play anymore is the most ridiculous thing. It's like, I can't imagine the kind of person that would really believe that. And if they do express it on the forums, I think it's because they just want to feel like they're a more hardcore fan than they really are. And it's just pathetic. It really is. As long as you are watching Grandmaster League players duke it out, you're going to see some good games. And even with the best players, you still see some really shitty games. There's plenty of bad games played in the GSL. Let's not claim that the GSL has the best games all the time, because it doesn't. There's some amazing games played at all kinds of levels, and I would hope that the vast majority of people really support that. But when it comes to looking at the community, it seems like they don't. And there's just this tendency to shit on everything for no reason whatsoever. The recent Scarlet debacle, for instance, is just... It makes me want to throw up. It really does.
I stayed out of that thread. I didn't even...
I had no interest in really going in there because at the end of the day, what purpose does it serve me posting in there? It's obvious that I would post something in support of Scarlet and telling the trolls, like, yo, fuck you. But at the end of the day, the trolls are there to get a reaction out of you. Like, those kind of guys, they are genuinely there. You can't convince them, and if a famous person posts in that thread, they win. Why do you think so many big community figures, whether it be players or casters, just don't post regular on forums anymore? Because a lot of people that just want to get a reaction out of them, and for them that's kind of a victory. But the community is at times absolutely disgusting. It really is. I think the worst part ever comes out when you watch like a Twitch chat or whatever. Yeah. You see the worst side of the community when that happens. And yeah, it saddens me, but at the end of the day, you're always going to get shit on your shoes. You know, if you're going to have a big community like that, you're going to have the bottom feeders there. They exist. There's no real way to get rid of them. Just deal with the fact that they're there and try not to encourage them too much.
Well, you mentioned the Shoutcraft Invitational and kind of where that idea came from. I think maybe the third or fourth one you announced that it was 100% self-sustainable. Is that something that at the start of it you thought would ever happen? Well, it was what we were hoping for eventually, but it required certain things to occur. I started running my ladder streams partially to try and get a little bit better at the game, but more importantly, to make money. To make money for the Shoutcraft Invitationals. So it would create content for my YouTube channel, but the live stream ads would all feed back into the fund. And then Twitch TV brought out this subscriber functionality, and that allowed you to set up $5 subscriptions and things like that, and we got quite a big subscriber base. Like, we have a reasonable subscriber base, I would certainly say. And we thought at that point, right, because we're getting this regular income, this is the kind of time where we could sustain a Shoutcraft Invitational. Unfortunately, we ran into other problems that we didn't really know about. One, the fact that the Twitch TV counter for subscribers was inaccurate. They didn't code it properly. So
we've had to wrangle with them for quite some time about revenue and how many subscribers we really have versus how much they're actually paying us for. So, yeah, that's been a little bit awkward. The second point is that it's really hard to put on a tournament right now. Because we want it to be self-sustaining, what we also need is the tournament to get a lot of viewers, because we make a good amount of money during the tournament, whether it be in donations, which we'll stop taking donations, because again, it's self-sustaining. We want the players to get that money now. We want people that want to donate to the tournament to donate to the players via the tip jar system. But right now, good luck putting a tournament on if you're small like that. Every weekend for the next 3 months is booked by something. You're going to clash with something major. Yeah. The next 3 months. It's ridiculous when you think about it, but it's true. There are so many tournaments now. We've reached a massive saturation point. And when it comes to live viewing, you've got to have a good number of concurrents, and you can only get those on the weekend. You can't get them during the week. You just can't do it. Because, of course, either the Europeans can't watch or the Americans can't watch. When it comes to our viewership, we've got maybe 60-40 in favor of Europe. So we can't afford to lose either demographic. So it's a struggle for us. You know, we have a $10,000 prize pool sitting here ready to go. We've been saving some money over the past couple of months. We have a lot of money ready to put on the biggest event we've done yet. And we'll be damned if we can find a time when we can actually do it. It's annoying as hell. It really is.
What do you think about the saturation of StarCraft 2 in the sense that would you ever leave, or not leave, but kind of depart from the StarCraft 2 esports scene and do something with League of Legends? Is there a point where too much StarCraft 2 becomes hurtful to its own cause?
I think it can be, because you end up diluting the events in general. If you have too much StarCraft 2, what generally happens is that you will get clashes. When you have a clash, there will be a winner and there will be a loser. Someone will do well, someone will get trampled. The most recent example of someone getting trampled would be the GESL. They got annihilated by DreamHack. They had a lot of good players, like some really high-quality Korean players, and there weren't all that many at DreamHack. And that's common for DreamHack. It's expensive to fly to DreamHack. DreamHack doesn't pay for flights like, say, MLG does or anything like that. So it's really inconvenient for a lot of Koreans to actually go to DreamHack. Not to mention the fact that the field's really hard because all the really good Europeans are there. So Koreans can actually lose, as we saw in the DreamHack event. I think that if we have too many of these large-scale events that cost a lot of money, i.e. any kind of LAN event, then what we're going to have is sponsors coming into the scene, getting really shitty ROI, and then not coming back. I am really shocked that I haven't heard some massive murmurings from Gigabyte saying this was terrible for us. Because, like, views-wise, they've got nothing to show for it. They had terrible concurrents, they had terrible uniques for GESL. And that was a huge deal, and Gigabyte invested a lot into that LAN. They easily gave away more product than, probably by several orders of magnitude, than the money they actually made back on that stream. I don't know how much the LAN made on its own. Maybe the LAN actually made a reasonable amount, but I would think that event would make a pretty significant loss, at a guess. Obviously, I don't know that, but it seems like it would. I just don't see how they could have been profitable. So the more of this we get, the worse it gets. And I actually think that we might end up going back to more online events, because online events are sustainable. You can make money off an online event. You can reduce your overhead to a very low amount and yet still get a ton of viewers. Like, if you were to look at DreamHack, for instance, look at how much DreamHack got versus what the Shoutcraft Invitational got. And, like, SCI 4 got almost as much as DreamHack did, concurrence-wise and uniques. That's a lot of views for an online tournament I ran from my bedroom. You can do that, and I'm really surprised that we're seeing a lot of movements away from that, and I think maybe it's too much too soon, because you get these clashes, and you even get some of the Titans clash at times, which is terrible. You know, when we had clashes with MLG and DreamHack, I've cast LANs in the UK that have clashed with MLG, and they've been annihilated. You know, I've done ECL, I've done I-Series. When we've clashed with MLG, we've got our asses kicked, obviously. And it's a really big problem. So I think we may be going a little bit too fast. That worries me a lot, especially bearing in mind that League of Legends is getting just flat out more views all the time. It is a bigger game, and I think more sponsors might be saying, you know what? I'm thinking we just sponsor a League of Legends event instead, because even if we put on a small LoL event, we're still going to get a lot of viewers because you've got 35 million active accounts on that game, whereas you have not even a fraction of that for StarCraft.
Just a quick question: would you ever run a League of Legends event? Is that something
No.
you plan on doing? No.
No, not LoL. Like I used to play LoL a lot, and I got out of the scene about 9-10 months ago. And I don't really have any intention of getting back into it. It's a pretty fun game. I think from a spectator standpoint, it sucks. Even with the spectator interface, it's a really bad game to watch. And I think this is kind of true of most MOBAs, honestly. Because the thing about MOBAs is that you've got 5 characters with stats that are kind of hidden under the hood as a result of holding various items and having a certain level. That's terrible for spectators. It's like WoW Arena was. Unless you know the game, you don't know why someone is winning. In StarCraft, if someone's got 80 Marines and the other guy's got 40 Zerglings, who's going to win that? It's the guy with 80 Marines. It's obvious. It's visual. You can tell. You don't have to know a lot about the game to know this guy's got a big stompy army. He's in a really great position. He's got siege tanks at the back, and look at these big explosions on the front line. It's obvious that this guy is doing well, and it's got this much broader appeal. And this is the thing with LoL. You got 35 million active accounts, and yet you look at, say, 200,000 concurrents. All right, but then you look at StarCraft, and you look at maybe, the really good events like the main Dream Hacks and the main MLGs and the main IPLs are getting maybe 90 to 100,000 concurrents, and then you think 35 million versus I think StarCraft 2 sold about 4 or 5 million. That's a good ratio for StarCraft 2. It really is. Like there are more active stream viewers for StarCraft 2 versus the number of people who actually got involved in the game than there are for League of Legends. They have a much smaller ratio, but they have such a large base that they can have these streams which get 200,000 concurrents, no problem at all.
Do you have any updates on your, kind of a silly question, on your, I think it was the referrals, once you hit 10,000 or something, you get a unit in game. Are we going to see a TotalBiscuit in League of Legends anytime soon?
I can't talk about a lot of that because I'm under legal non-disclosure agreement, which would get me sued if I talked a lot about it. But what I will say is I wouldn't expect it anytime soon.
Okay.
As regards to an item, which was the 1,000 referral reward, they are actively talking to me about that right now. So there will be some kind of TotalBiscuit related item. We just had to put something in the game that wasn't breaking the setting. Like, we can't have something called TotalBiscuit. It's just, it doesn't work. Like, Athene got away with it because Athene is a generic enough name. It's like Athene's Unholy Goblet, I think. There'll be something in there that is related to me in some way. It might be a little bit more subtle, but it will be there.
Gotcha. You were talking a lot about tournament models online versus LAN. What are your thoughts on the whole pay-per-view thing that MLG kind of started, and now it was just announced that the arenas are going to go back to the freemium
Model, yeah.
style of viewership? What are your thoughts on pay-per-view? Is that a lost cause in this scene?
No, it's not. I think it's a great idea, personally. And this is I put out a post a little while ago when I think it was Spring Arena 2 was getting this criticism. Like, oh, pay-per-view is a terrible idea for the scene. And there's a number of reasons why that's wrong. I think the first thing is that people don't really realize how insignificant they are from an advertising standpoint. Like, there's a reason why advertising is paid per 1,000, not per person. Because the amount of money an actual individual makes is nothing at all. It's completely insignificant. That's why people say, oh, if you ban me from your YouTube channel, you'll lose money. It's like, there is not a denomination of money in the world that exists that is small enough to represent how insignificant that loss would be. That's exactly the same with advertising in everything when it comes to YouTube, when it comes to Twitch. So when you have one person that pays $20 or even 10, that person is more valuable than thousands, many thousands of people. Even if a normal person would watch maybe 20, 30 ads, maybe more than that, they are so much more important. So when you say, oh, 4,000 viewers for pay-per-view, that's really bad. No, it's not. That's 4,000 viewers that are paying for it. Are you kidding me? That's a big chunk of change to the point where you can either break even or maybe even make a profit on an event. When your pay-per-view is a really solid, reliable model versus advertising, which varies on a weekly basis, like the CPM varies, the CPM you get based on different countries varies, the amount of people that get advertising varies. Like, if Twitch's inventory is bad that month, and you don't get ads playing for half the people, and that's really bad. What if the ad system breaks? It broke during a Shoutcraft. We lost like $2,000. Because it just wasn't working. It wasn't playing advertisements. So, to me, pay-per-view is a really solid idea as long as you don't do it too much. And this is the mistake that MLG makes. The mistake that MLG makes on pay-per-view is that they link the pay-per-view arenas in some way to the main events. That should not happen. It shouldn't happen because the thing about these events is that they have a storyline. How people got there is actually very important to being engaged, especially from the Korean standpoint. Because Koreans, they have a personality problem. They need to talk to the Brood War guys about personality. You look at those Kesper players on that MLG stage, and you tell me that those guys didn't have personality. They did. But our StarCraft 2 pros, there's only a few Koreans that really have that personality. And you could say, oh, well, this guy's great at the game. Yeah, so are a bunch of other Koreans, and so are a bunch of other foreigners as well. It's really hard to relate to people like that. Now, it helps you to relate when you followed the tournaments up to this. Like, how did they get here? You got to see the qualifiers. Okay, the qualifiers are not pay-per-view. Good, right, we can watch those. And then we get this big gap where people that can't watch the pay-per-view don't have any idea what the storyline is. Like, who did this guy beat? How did he do it? They want to watch that live. They don't care about VODs anymore. I think VODs are losing... That's becoming less and less relevant as we go through. People want the live experience. They don't care about VODs anymore. So, making the arenas directly influence the championships is the real problem with pay-per-view. From the standpoint of, oh, it's killing eSports because new people come in and they can't watch the pay-per-views. No, you don't have to have every tournament as a tournament that attracts new people into the scene. There are so many tournaments and so many VODs and casters available that can do that for you. It's not even relevant. If the vast majority of tournaments are free to watch, which they are and will continue to be, then you can get new players and you can get new viewers in that way. It's okay to have a couple of pay-per-view events every now and again. And I think that model should actually continue. I'm a bit worried about the freemium model, actually. I think from a PR standpoint, it's good, because now everyone's like, ooh, Sundance is wonderful, Sundance gets it, blah, blah, blah. You know, Sundance is great when it comes to its PR, no question about that. And MLG will benefit in the short term from that, but I have to wonder if dismantling their own pay-per-view model is really a good idea, because I think just toughing it out and saying, we're going to do some events that are pay-per-view. Deal with it. We pay for all of the casters to come in. We pay for all of the players to come in. It's a great event for the teams, because the teams don't have to pay anything to be there. They don't have to think about travel costs, accommodation. They get into this, and they have a good chance at getting money. They get good exposure on a good stage, and yeah, it doesn't have the most viewers, but it's actually sustainable. And that's so important, because I think so many of these lands right now are not sustainable. They're making loss leader approaches, and it's going to come back to bite them in the ass. And this is not the first time this has happened with esports. My God, there have been so many big esports organizations in the past, before StarCraft 2 even came out, that imploded because they tried to do too much too quickly.
Yeah. A couple more questions in the realm of StarCraft 2. First one, you and Apollo kind of... there was a time when Tastosis was growing, and more people kind of saw that and started to form duos. You and Apollo formed one yourself, and
Yep.
for a while you guys were doing events together and never really splitting up.
Yep.
As of late, Apollo's been doing other events kind of in affiliation with the Good Studio, as well as just
Yep.
on his own. Is that troublesome to you guys? Are you worried about that at all? Are we going to see you guys do
Not
more
really
events
concerned.
together? Or
It doesn't really worry me that much. I think this year is going to be a year where you see a lot of Apollo minus me, Apollo with somebody else. And that's really kind of okay, because even when we had a duo, we still had that happen. Like, we had the two Dream Hacks where it was Apollo and Day 9. You know, they were together at that point. And this was the point where Apollo was actually getting a lot of stick, because he was put next to Day 9. And at that point, Day 9 could eclipse him in terms of knowledge and in terms of personality. Good luck getting a word in edgeways when you're casting with Day 9. Like, you need to be an alpha personality to do that. Husky casts with him really well, because Husky will not be put in the corner. He refuses. He is up front. The role definition works really well between those two guys. But at that time, Apollo otherwise would be casting with me, mostly because I was getting the gigs, because I had the fan base, and I still do. And I had exposure and prominence, and Apollo didn't at that stage. So actually, I was bringing Apollo along to a lot of these gigs and saying, I want to cast with Apollo. I want you to bring this guy in, and he's going to be my co-caster. This is not really the case anymore. He doesn't really need me anymore. He can cast with any play-by-play, and he'll be great. He was great with Cat's Pajamas. He's great with DJ Wheat. Pretty much any play-by-play, because he knows his role. He understands the differentiation between play-by-play and analysis, and he sticks to his analysis, and he knows when to talk, he knows when to shut up. So he's really, really good at that. Now, I'm not really worried about it, because I also want to cast with other people too. I cast with Husky while I was in MLG, and it was great fun. I don't think it was all that analytical, but I think for pure hype, it's really a shame we weren't on Red. I think if we'd been on the main stage, even with one match, me and Husky, I think you would have seen a hyped crowd, because we were going ballistic, and it was great. And I also really enjoyed casting with Mr. Bitter, because for all of Diapolo's strengths, he's not all that good when it comes to bouncing humor around. He generally doesn't either have a comeback or he doesn't understand the reference, whereas Mr. Bitter understands every reference. You toss a Dune reference at him, he knows it. You toss an obscure sci-fi reference, he can run with it, and he's a genuinely funny person, and he's really eloquent and well-spoken. So I would like to cast more with those two, and I don't really feel the need to cast with Apollo, but I still feel comfortable with him, and I asked him recently, be honest with me, do you still want to cast with me? Because you've cast with all these other guys right now, you're basically now the most in-demand caster, up and coming. When it comes to casting, you are wanted at pretty much every tournament. Do you still want to cast with me? And he's like, yes. I enjoy casting with you more than I enjoy casting with anyone else. And I'm like, okay then, that's cool. We'll cast together when we can, and when we can't, it's not really a big deal for me, especially since I'm not doing any European events this year. So I've just decided I want to focus on US, I want to focus on the family, I want to focus on getting all of the permanent residency stuff sorted out. So I'm not going to be casting with him all the time. I don't even expect him to be casting the next Shoutcraft with me. I would think that that's going to be somebody else.
Interesting. One of the other things in the StarCraft 2 world, you announced, I'm trying to think how far back this was, but a sponsorship of Bling. Bling being, I guess, mainly sponsored by Dignitas, but
yeah.
How was that kind of formed, and is that an ongoing sponsorship? Do you still... Is it a monetary sponsorship? What is that actually?
Yeah, it's cash. It's monthly cash essentially to supplement, because at the end of the day, Dignitas is a very large team, because they don't just do StarCraft, and they also have players on that team that have higher salaries than other players. Let's get that out in the open. Not everyone gets paid the same on any team. So I think anyone could pretty much guess who is the highest paid on Dignitas. That should be obvious to anyone with a functioning brain. Yeah. And when it comes to Bling is the newest, well, he's not the newest member now, Dream is, but Bling is like a junior member of Dignitas. So him getting salaried was kind of a difficult thing for the finances. So I was talking I was talking to Odie, the manager, after I went down, because I've worked with them in a couple of different tournaments and things like that, and I meet them at events all the time. And I was saying, well, what if we could sponsor that player? What if we could actually help with the sponsorship? We could pay a significant chunk of his monthly wage, and in return for that, we basically get sponsorship and a few other benefits that I don't want to talk about. But in terms of money, it's just like we pay him a set amount every month that helps supplement the money that he's getting. It helps him actually kind of subsist on a monthly basis. He gets enough money to live on, whereas previously it would have been a bit difficult. So he gets to focus primarily on his StarCraft. Now, as regards to how the sponsorship's going, I mean, it's going fine. We don't expect amazing results out of him all the time, because it's really difficult to do that. But what we do expect is for him to be putting on good showings, showing good games, and being the best in the UK. And right now, I'd still say that he is. He's doing really well. I'm really happy with how he's doing at this point. I do want to see him win something, of course, that isn't just a UK LAN. He dominates everything in the UK, of course, but outside he struggled a little bit. I think maybe it would be nice to see him play a few more online events, because he doesn't really play a huge number of them, and that's something that we might end up talking to him about. It's like, get some good results online, because that's what you were able to do previously, and focus a little bit on that, because in 2012 he really hasn't been playing a lot of those events. So aside from that, I think it's worked out pretty well for us so far. It's gotten us the kind of exposure that we wanted from it. It got a good response to the community, which of course is a factor. It supported the UK scene, which it desperately needs to be. I'm hoping that also the World Championship Series event down there will help that out a little bit too. So let's be honest, the UK it's not doing well StarCraft-wise. It doesn't have a lot of good players, doesn't have a lot of good events. It's pretty much got I-Series, and that's really about it. So, yeah, it's going all right.
All right, and kind of the final question I have is there, or at least for StarCraft 2, excuse me, is there anything content-wise that you have planned or you've kind of put on the back burner but you plan on doing here pretty soon that either you can announce, you can tease, you can reveal, or anything like that?
Well, I can say Shoutcraft is actively in development. Shoutcraft 5 is going to be big. It's going to be bigger than before. It's going to have more players than before. That I'll say for a fact. It's going to have some really great players. It's going to have a new system in terms of the prize money. It's going to be, well, I won't tell you exactly what it is because it's still in development, and more to the point, because this is something that my wife is heavily involved in Shoutcraft. Like she develops a lot of it, she deals with a lot of it. So if I come on the show and say, "Oh, these ideas," yeah, she will actually kill me. So, but we've had some ideas about how to change the format around, how to incorporate more players while still keeping the same feel. So there's a lot of cool stuff that's going there. We want to actively have more analysis involved in it that doesn't just involve the casters. So something like an analysis desk is in development for that. Some ideas in regards to sponsorship. And I think this is kind of important because it's something that no other tournament has really done yet. It's giving the sponsors of the players ROI by essentially allowing them to be displayed in-game. Like, think about how football or soccer is played. On a shirt, you've got that logo. You see the players on the field all the time. StarCraft doesn't do that, especially in online events. Online, you never see the sponsors of the players unless they incorporate them in some way into their tag, which some players have had to do lately because sponsors said, well, what's the point in us sponsoring you? Nobody knows. What I want to do is incorporate those player sponsors directly into the tournament so that people can see it. What we're thinking... People will probably steal this idea, but you know what? I don't care because it's good for the scene.
Let me get a pen and paper.
Yeah, steal it. Steal this idea. What we're thinking is custom scoreboard with sponsorship logos incorporated directly into the scoreboard on a player-by-player basis. So if you see the Steel Series logo, you see the Razer logo, you see the Gigabyte logo, the Monster logo, blah, 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 you'll see it on the scoreboard during the game. It will be non-intrusive, but it will give direct sponsor presence in every single match that player actually plays. So we want to do that. And if you want any evidence that that's a good idea, you can just go and have a look at Valve, because that's exactly what they're doing in Dota 2. Yeah. Dota 2 is going to have banners on the back of players, and you could put the sponsorship logos in there. We need more of that. There is no support in game for that whatsoever. Sponsors need better ROI so we can bring more money into the scene. Tournaments have to lead the way because Blizzard won't. Blizzard will not put that functionality in. I can tell you that for a fact. So tournaments have to do it, and I'm hoping that more of them do.
Do you plan on bringing, or I guess doing more of the I Suck at StarCraft series? I know I have a lot of people asking about that.
Yeah, every now and again I do a video for that. I try to stream as well, but right now I'm having some serious streaming problems, which seem to be related to my ISP. So I'm thinking of calling them on Monday to really hammer them about that. It's weird because maybe someone has an idea. By the way, I'm just going to put this out. I'm going to take over your show for a second too for tech support.
I mean, full screening.
why would a connection drop regularly on a 15 to 30 minute kind of timescale, like either every 15 minutes or a multiple of 15? Like 30 or 45 minutes. And that would happen regularly. Like there'd be a brief drop for a couple of seconds in the connection that kills the stream. Why would that happen? What would cause it? And we've already thought about, I think it's DCHP leasing. I was looking in my settings for that. That seems fine. It's fine in the router. What would cause that to happen? If you've got any ideas, please, by all means, let me know. Because aside from calling the ISP at this point, I am out of ideas, and I can't stream at the moment because of that. And I've got a great connection. It works fine for everything else. I can upload YouTube videos at like 650k a second, and it's great. You know, it's wonderful for it. But when it comes to streaming, I get these drops. Why is that?
I don't know. We need to get Gunrun on the case.
I tried, man. Gunrun did some stuff with my XSplit, but it didn't help, unfortunately. He's great, but yeah. I think it's ISP bound. I don't think it can fix that. But yeah, I suck at StarCraft 2 and Showcraft streams will be happening when I've got all this stuff fixed. So you'll probably see a more I suck at StarCraft 2 until the stream is done, just like VOD replay stuff.
Gotcha. Kind of jumping back to the YouTube. You're very well known for playing games with your What the Fuck Is series outside of StarCraft 2 on it. Kind of in lines with esports. What makes a good esport game in your opinion? And using that as a rule set, is there anything on the horizon that will make for a good esport in your eyes?
Well, I think that what makes a good esports game is the ability to watch it without knowing a lot about it. Like, you've got to have something that's spectator-friendly and it's obvious what's going on. I don't think that any MOBA games actually make good esport games in the long run. I think that something like League of Legends has a limited time in the spotlight, and it's going to rise or fall entirely based on how popular it is as a game, like how many people are playing it. Whereas StarCraft, you have a fall-off in the number of people that have played ladder, and yet tournament streams continue to get loads of viewers. Why is that? Because people, even if they're not playing the game, they love watching it because it's actually really easy to watch, and it's a very cool, dynamic game. So I think that if you make an esports game, you've got to develop something that is complex, but doesn't hide too much of its complexity under the hood. It's got to still be visual. For a MOBA game, how do you know how powerful a character is unless you know what these items are? If a character has... God, I haven't played LoL. It's not 9 months. I can't even remember any items. I'm so terrible. You know, what happens if a character is fully decked out, has everything he possibly could need? He's got his Infinity Blade. He's monstrous. He's got everything he could possibly need. But you don't know what those items are. Why is this character doing so much damage? It's not obvious. What do these abilities do? They're not necessarily visual enough. It's actually something Dota 2 does better, by the way. From a visual standpoint, the abilities are more obvious as to what they do. Like when Earthshaker does his... What the hell is it called? Fissure, exactly. It's so obvious what that is. It's a guy with a huge, like, totem. He smashes the ground, and you see it go forward. Now, that's cool. LoL doesn't do that as well. You really can't tell, like, oh, right, well... This character, why is this character doing these things? Why is this character so powerful? You've got to not have that. You really, really do. This is why Bloodline Champions, in my opinion, is a much better game for esports, even though it hasn't been picked up too much yet, because items are a non-issue, and it's obvious why an ability does what it does. There's a lot of oomph behind the abilities, a lot of feedback on the screen. Even the abilities are color-coded to show who's casting them. It's a really great idea. So I think if you want to make an esports game, you've got to focus on the ability to be appreciated by people that don't actively play it. And it shouldn't be so complex that you need a very strong working knowledge of the game in order to fully appreciate it.
In terms of kind of games on the horizon, is there any one in particular that you think, besides kind of BLC?
Esports-wise, Shootmania might. The thing about Shootmania is that you can't really tell because the competitive mode that becomes popular may not be what we're showing now. We showed off the Tournament Elite mode, which is that 3-on-1 asymmetrical mode, which is really odd, but I mean, for us, it was kind of cool. It's easy to spectate because there's only two views that really matter. There's the attacker view and there's the overhead. And that stuff is already in the game. You can show it very easily. It's obviously very skill-based, and I think a lot of people appreciate it. We had a mixed response, I think, to the Shootmania stuff we put out. But a lot of people did actually appreciate it. It's like, look, this is kind of interesting. So maybe that gets somewhere from the first-person shooter side of things. Aside from that, I think probably some smaller-scale strategy games. There's some stuff coming out that I think Star Void and End of Nations, which are based around... It's more like a World in Conflict style setting where you don't build units actively. You spawn them in, and it's all about micro and squad tactics. I think that there's a real potential for that to actually take off. Especially bear in mind End of Nations is free to play, so I think that could drive it too. So I'm intrigued to see how that turns out.
What do you think about this kind of... Mainstream gaming has a lot of trends that come in and kind of encapsulate certain areas of it. Esports or esport is starting to be one of these trends. We kind of see it a little bit with Shootmania where they're developing it for esports. League of Legends also kind of has that as a tagline. A lot of different companies are out there kind of tagging esports on when necessarily it's not an esport game through and through.
Yeah.
What do you think about that trend, and do you support it? Are you against it? And does it have a place in that in mainstream gaming.
It's nice that they're trying. I just think most of them don't even know what they're doing with it. I've heard from... I think what people maybe don't know is because maybe they just see my StarCraft stuff and they don't see the rest of it, which is significantly larger in terms of the views we get. That I get quite a lot of developers come to me on a consultation basis to ask about either esports or to ask about various parts of their game and, is this any good? What would you change? Like free-to-play models and things like that. And what I've said to a lot of them when it comes to esports is, why are you trying to be an esport? And more to the point, why was this not on your mind when you first started making the game? I think that if you don't make a game that has esports in mind from the start, then you're going to struggle. It doesn't mean that you're doomed. A lot of the times you see these esports that arise when, the very start of esports was StarCraft, for instance. Blizzard never intended that, but it happened with StarCraft, so you can't necessarily predict what will become an esport and what will not. But I think that a lot of companies are trying to get into the scene because they see it as a potential for longevity for the title. They see it as a potential for money-making, being able to host live events. Maybe they can get vendors there that pay them rent for floor space. Maybe they can put on large tournaments. And also, it keeps their game going. And it also means they can sell expansions and DLC and things like that, as well as micropayments. In League of Legends is a prime example of that. It makes pretty much all of its money from people buying skins. And that only happens because it has such a huge base, and people want to show off their skins in esports as well. But I think a lot of companies are going in not knowing what they're doing, and I don't think it's going to harm esports, honestly. I just don't think that it's going to really work out for them. I think the people that are going to be most hurt by this are the actual developers themselves and the publishers who are putting a lot of stock into esports, and they're not going to see a return from it, and they're probably just going to end up then abandoning it. I think sponsors are perhaps smart enough, though, to not sponsor esports. They sponsor LoL. They sponsor StarCraft. They sponsor Dota 2. They don't sponsor esports, and they don't kind of sprinkle their advertising revenue over every single game that claims to be an esport. I think they're a bit smarter than that.
Now, you mentioned that a lot of developers are kind of coming to you asking for esports. You've also done a lot of just developer style content on your channel. Mm-hmm. Is this kind of your edge right now on the almost the booming gaming YouTube market? Because StarCraft 2 is kind of dying off in that sense.
From a YouTube standpoint, it is, yeah. I think StarCraft 2 is all about live streaming these days, and you're seeing views of VODs go down across the board. Look how much HD has lost in terms of his popularity.
Right.
Check out his views now compared to a couple of years ago. Even Husky isn't getting as many, and he's diversifying a little bit. I think he'll still be able to make his way no problem with StarCraft VODs. But yeah, you're right. It is kind of dying off in that respect. My edge, I think, is that I already saw this kind of thing coming, not with StarCraft, but with WoW. When Cataclysm Beta first was starting to come to an end, I realized this gravy train is going to end, and I need to be prepared for what's next. And I've got to make sure I never attach myself too much to one game. My success or failure cannot be in the hands of somebody else. It's got to be under my control. The way that I make that happen is by diversifying and by setting up a format which has infinite content. WTF could never possibly end, because there's always going to be new games coming out. So I think that I definitely have an edge in that regard. I also make longer videos than most people, and I think that a lot of, say, video reviews from large-scale sites like GameSpot and like IGN are like 3 to 4 minute clips, and they're aimed at a different market. They're aimed at a younger market. I aim at an older market. My demographic now, my primary demographic is 18 to 25. In fact, I think my third strongest demographic is the 13 to 17. I've got 18 to 25, and I've got 25 to 34. And they want longer things. They want videos which are almost podcasts in and of themselves. And I can do that. And I can provide them with what is, I don't focus so much on the humor. Sometimes I'll make jokes and people seem to like them and things like that. But I don't focus on that. I focus on analysis. And I focus on saying, this is what's good about the game. This is what's not good about the game. I get a bit passionate sometimes when I see a feature I really don't like. The recent example being Max Payne 3. I got a lot of hate for that review, I suppose people call it. I don't think it's a review. I don't think that WTF is a review series, because I think that to review a game, you've got to play the whole bloody thing first. No, I don't do that. I do a first impressions. I play sometimes from the very start, and then other times I'll play maybe an hour in because the game just doesn't suit that. But all the hate it got doesn't matter. That video's got 250,000 views. That video did really well for us. So I think that people do like to see a strong opinion on something, even if they don't necessarily disagree with it. Even though people will turn around and say, oh, you're terrible for saying this, I'm unsubscribing. The channel ain't gotten any smaller. The vast silent majority want this kind of content, and they're not getting it anywhere else, or at least they're getting it from very limited places. A couple of the guys in the game station that I really like, for instance, Angry Joe and JonTron, they do stuff like this. Although JonTron focuses more on humor, Angry Joe is more about kind of the ranting, more so than I am, but he still does the analysis, and he's still legit in terms of his game analysis. So I think there's a very limited number of people that are doing it, and a lot more people that want to see it. So for us, it's been the secret, I suppose, to our success for the last couple of years, and it continues to be our biggest draw to the channel.
We've seen YouTubers like yourself and the guys you were just mentioning get more and more of a important role and have a lot of clout kind of inside the gaming community.
Yep.
What do you think about that role of YouTubers now in mainstream gaming really, really starting to grow, and a lot more people getting away from the traditional gaming journalism, if you can even call it that in some aspects,
in some aspects,
to what you're doing now with kind of the what the fuck is, where even sites like Giant Bomb are kind of built upon their quick looks, which is essentially their version of what the fuck is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, WTF, let's flip it around here. Let's be completely honest. This is real talk, no fluff. The concept for WTF came from quick looks. It's like, this is a good concept. Not enough people are doing it.
Right.
Why don't I try and do something myself? And for us, WTF is mostly focused on indie titles. Not always. Like, we'll throw in some major titles every now and again, but for us, it was like, we're going to focus pretty much purely on PC, indie, and usually stuff that is come out pretty recently, so people can have a little bit of a live demo. I think that's why, because it's so raw, because it's unfiltered opinion, it's commentary coming off the cuff as it's happening. So it's always going to be honest. Like, you can't premeditate dishonesty. People can tell in your voice. You're doing a live commentary. You can't lie to them. They're not stupid. So it's really good for people to get that honest and in-depth perspective into a game that they won't necessarily find in a review. A review picks points. A review is shorter. What they want to see is not little bits of gameplay, which you'll see in like an IGN video review. They want to see a big chunk of gameplay. Like, warts and all, I think, is the approach that I like to call it. So I think that way more people are into that now, and the popularity of Quick Looks demonstrates that, the popularity of WTF demonstrates that, and the fact that we have a lot of people that are now doing this kind of stuff, imitators, and that's fine. It's such a generic concept. I couldn't care less. I mean, again, I nicked it from Giant Bomb. If you want to do something like that, it's fine. Just don't call it the same as my freaking videos. It's such a dumb thing. I'm going to call it WTF. It's like, no.
It's kind of the Let's Play syndrome, where that's been
dick move.
That's been taken up by everyone almost on YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't like the whole Let's Playing thing, because I'll do a video of a game, and then I would just want to touch it again. Maybe I'll do an update video if something significant happens, but I hate the idea of taking someone else's work and milking the shit out of it. As soon as Skyrim came out, it's ridiculous how many people like, let's play 20 parts a day.
Yeah.
Like, you fucking talentless little shits. It's like, let's just make as many videos as we can, so that we can make as much money as we can while people still care about this game. It's all about the money. It is. Like, every YouTuber you see do that, they're doing it because it makes them a lot of money.
Right.
It's as simple as that. And yeah, of course it's entertaining. Like, they're providing a service that people want, but it leaves a sour taste in my mouth when people just want to put out videos as quickly as they can to kind of ride the bandwagon of success or something like that. And they don't want to think about, well, how can I make this high quality? How valuable is this content? And, maybe there's another game that actually deserves my attention. I don't think as a YouTuber you've really got to be an evangelist for games that really need attention, but there are loads of other games on the market that are really starved for players that are really, really good. Why don't you point them in that direction instead of having, millions of people watch you play fucking Happy Wheels? Everyone knows what Happy Wheels is. Everyone knows what Minecraft is. Come on. Everyone knows what Skyrim is. And what's especially bad is that a lot of these more story-driven games, the single-player stuff, some people are just watching the games and not playing them these days.
Yeah.
Because just like the Let's Play doesn't even add anything because it's mostly cutscenes or dialogue, and then if they're talking over that, then they're shit at it anyway. But it's like, wow, you are really making money off someone else here. You really are. All of this voice acting and everything, you didn't do any of this stuff, really. So why is it that you get to make all the money off it? What's wrong with that? That doesn't seem right to me.
It's a good outlook on it. What do you like making content-wise? What's your favorite type of content to make yourself?
StarCraft 2 live stuff at events is the most thrilling. I love being in front of a crowd doing that stuff. It's great. It's also good to really see the other side of the negativity on the internet, because people at events are cool as hell. Some of them are a bit awkward. That's okay. People are shy. I used to be shy. But they're cool. Like, they're really genuinely awesome people that come out to these events. I've never had a bad experience at an event like that. Never. Everyone's always been awesome. If a little bit awkward sometimes, but yeah, that happens. It's no biggie.
Yeah.
But for my main channel, I think WTF is cool because I get to play a lot of different games. I get to experience a lot of different things. But every now and again, I do a piece where it's on a very specific topic, and I think it's the most fulfilling when I do something like that. An example would be when I called out the bullshit of 2K Elizabeth. So 2K Elizabeth is a representative for the publishing company 2K. Now, 2K Games has published a lot of very, very famous games. You should know who 2K are, quite frankly. They've put out a lot of stuff, and in this case, they published a game called The Darkness 2. Most people should know about The Darkness 2. It was a fairly well-received title. But for PC, it didn't have a good set of PC options because it didn't have an FOV slider, field of view. And it was very, very narrow. Now, if you've played a PC game that has made you feel nauseous at any point, usually a first-person shooter, you probably know what FOV is. A narrow FOV is designed for people playing on televisions half the room away. It is not designed for people who are sitting in front of a monitor only a couple of feet away. And it can make you feel nauseous. It makes me feel nauseous. It gives me headaches. And pretty much every PC game that is a first-person shooter should have this slider. Now, I called them out on it, and 2K Elizabeth actually responded saying it's impossible in this game. It can't be done for technical reasons. And tried to explain this away, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think you're telling the truth. Either you're just trying to defend the company, which is your job, that's cool, but I don't think you're telling the truth. So I went out to basically hack the FOV of Darkness 2 using a widescreen hacking tool to force it into a wider field of view. And I put that out, and I explained to everyone what FOV was. I did some comparisons, things like that, and it ended up with a FOV slider and a response from the creative director of the game saying, we understand your concerns, we're gonna do something about it. And Darkness 2 got an FOV slider, as have several other PC games. And to me, that is fulfilling as hell, because I get to play a small role in making PC gaming better. And that's so cool. That's where I kind of want to be in my life right now. I want to be able to have a positive influence on gaming. And I think that series like WTF have been able to do that. From an indie standpoint, we've been able to drive sales of indie games that wouldn't have otherwise sold very well. We've driven sales of stuff like Frozen Synapse. We were the primary driving force behind the sales of Magicka and its success, and things like that. That's really fulfilling, and I want to keep doing that.
That was kind of my next question. With YouTube, it seems like the YouTubers themselves have to constantly evolve to what is trending, what is popular, what's getting them
Sometimes
the most views. At least maybe in a larger scale, not on a day-to-day basis. But
yeah.
Do you ever see yourself doing anything else, such as going into being a game designer full-time?
It always interests me. I have ideas for games. I've had ideas for lots of different games, card games, board games. I actually almost finished a World of Warcraft-based game. I wish I could finish it. Although I would probably have to change it from WoW these days because Blizzard tends to get litigious about those kind of things. But I've had ideas in my head for the longest time, but I don't think I would ever go into it full-time. I think I enjoy presenting to an audience a little bit too much to actually do that, to be a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. I don't think I could really do it.
Now, kind of getting a little bit more personal, a lot of people are very familiar with your story about the visa issues that you've had with the U.S. and whatnot, and how you were basically separated from your family for a little over 2 years, was it?
Yeah, it was actually a bit more than that. It was more like 3.5.
So what did it mean to you to finally, after you've you've had success with the YouTube world and the StarCraft 2 world, to come back over to the U.S. and now you're living here in the U.S. with your family. What does that mean to you to be back after kind of being away so long to them, or from them? Sorry.
We'll just wait and see if Skype actually clears up, because it looks like we've got a bit of a freeze here. Are we back on? There we go. Yeah. Okay, that looks a bit better. All right, great. Skype's terrible, by the way. Anyway, so to me, it's like it was the biggest kind of cloud over my head for the last 3 to 4 years has been lifted. There's been times when the relationship got very, very difficult for obvious reasons. We were together in the same place, and then we weren't. That's difficult, and most relationships don't survive that process. Ours did, but it certainly didn't do it without scars. You know, it's been difficult. I've got to kind of praise the patience of Jen, certainly, and the patience of Orion as well, for actually putting up with it and not just severing and saying it's less painful just to cut it off and just to go our separate ways. So I think people have probably noticed I've been a lot happier lately. I'm still not the happiest guy in the world.
You still got your cynical edge, man.
Yeah, of course not. I mean, I can't make any money otherwise. People would stop watching me. I can't be happy. Are you fucking serious? No. But I think that people have noticed a change in attitude. I think I respond like less to trolls online and stuff like that, just because Jen is there as a balancing influence, and because I'm just happier. You know, I'm not depressed. She's not depressed. We're forging ahead as kind of co-owners of the company and really making things work. So to me, it means that a really ugly part of my life, even though it essentially set up what I have now, has now ended, and I can actually look forward to the future now without the doubts that I used to have.
You mentioned that she is a co-owner of the company. What is her like day-to-day role within your company?
She's essentially vital for the company even running on a day-to-day basis. Like, from a financial standpoint, she deals with a lot of that. She liaises with our financial advisors to make things work. Obviously, we have paid employees, so they have to be paid. We've got to sort out the taxes for that kind of thing. We've got to be all above board with everything, and she understands that way better than I could. From an organizational standpoint, she is essentially the agent for me. You know, I am the, quote, talent. I hate that term. It's terrible, but... You blame MLG. They're the ones who bloody use it in their contracts. You're not the only ones, though. You're not the only ones. Everyone like refers to casters as the talent, which it's like, yeah, what we really need is a bigger ego boost. Thanks, guys. You know, we're gonna fly off at some point. Our heads are just too big. Can't fit them through the door. But she does a lot of the agent stuff, like bookings for events. She is responsible for a lot of that. She liaises with our PR guy, who is essentially responsible for getting us interviews and review code. But anything that involves payments and a lot of retainer fees and a lot of money and stuff, she is the driving force behind that. She makes the company run smoothly on a day-to-day basis, and she's vital for that. And she's also the person that really organizes the Shoutcraft Invitationals. They wouldn't happen without her.
You mentioned the company and that you have staff members. How many staff members do you guys have?
We have 5 total staff, including me and Jen. Okay. So we have a lot of them are actually European. We only have 2 American staff, which are technically American, I suppose, living in America. But yeah, she deals with a lot of the liaising with the European staff. So they work for us full time. You know, they're paid decent enough wages to actually work for us full time.
I'm trying to. If you had to send someone to kind of have them learn about your issues with the visa, who's covered it the best in your opinion? Just so if people want to learn more about that.
There's that Team Liquid thread that I posted ages ago. I think that post is the one that comes up every time it's mentioned. Okay. And balls if I can find it now, but I think if you look for like TotalBiscuit visa issues Team Liquid, you'll probably find it. Okay. It gets posted on Reddit a lot. That's probably the best description of it. And I think that there isn't really a lot to add to that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly why I don't really bring it up. But it's
pretty in depth.
It's very interesting and it's very in depth. So if you want to learn more, please go check that out.
Yeah.
Kind of winding down now with the main interview. Do you have any regrets so far in life, with business, with personal, with anything?
There's a few things. I mean, the first thing that I kind of regret, actually, which is from earlier in the personal life, it's got nothing to do with gaming, is that I didn't keep up playing my instrument. I'm really disappointed with myself for that, and it's really hard to get back into playing an instrument like that. That's a story in and of itself, because what happened was the military band I played with ended up essentially falling to pieces because of the actions of certain people within the Durham County Music Service, which was where I lived at the time. And the music service was kind of the bureaucracy which managed all of the educational-based music programs and things like that. And they essentially fucked over the two driving forces behind that band, which were the two conductors. Like, those guys had so much experience. They were great personalities. They knew how to get teenagers really enthused about music. They were the driving force behind the band. They worked us hard, but we were well-disciplined. We were exceptionally good at what we did. And as a result of those two basically being thrown under the bus by some bureaucratic little shits in that service, that band essentially collapsed. It's like, well done, guys. You know, the music service was designed to help provide educational and musical opportunities for people. What they just did was kill the passion. Yeah, I lost my passion. That's what it is. This is genuinely losing my passion. This is tasteless shit. This is actually losing my passion to the point where I stopped completely. They genuinely killed the passion of like 100 extremely talented individuals, and I really hope a lot of them went on to regain that. But I miss that band so much, and I miss what we did and the traveling we did. We went to Canada, we went to Malta, we traveled all over the place. We played amazing concerts that people really enjoyed. So I really regret not being a talented musician, I guess, anymore, and losing my ability to play that instrument. Aside from that, gaming-wise, regrets. I can always say that I kind of regret not jumping on the Minecraft bandwagon when I did, but actually I really don't regret that. Yes, I would have made a lot of money, and yes, I would have probably been a bigger site and a bigger channel than I am now if I jumped on the Minecraft bandwagon, but I would have also had a terrible, terrible fan base that I would have despised with every waking moment. And, you know, some of them I don't really like that much now, and I'm pretty vocal about how I don't like some of my viewers. Thankfully, they're the vocal minority, but the Minecraft fan base is just terrible. It really is. Like, you see the guys who post the Yogscast videos, they're so... you get a young fan base they're not open to anything else. If you don't post Minecraft, they get really mad. It's like, where's the Minecraft? This game's shit. Why aren't you playing Minecraft? I call them mono gamers. And this applies to everything, StarCraft as well. Unless you're a pro gamer in StarCraft, if the only thing you're interested in is StarCraft, you're probably going to be a very boring person and a very close-minded kind of person. So I guess in that respect, I maybe even regret not bailing on WoW sooner, because it would have been nice to diversify quicker than I did.
Now, have you ever thought about... just another question I'm randomly adding in. Have you ever thought about just recording something on your YouTube channel of you playing your instrument?
If I had the talent to do it again, I would. I think the thing people got to understand about double reeds, it would be really embarrassing, because double reed instruments need really a lot of lip strength that I don't have anymore. If you don't have that lip strength, what tends to happen is your cheeks kind of blow out like a hamster. It's like kind of like that. It's terrible. It's so bad. I can't keep my instrument in tune anymore. I don't have the technique and the stamina that I used to. And this entire conversation will be completely misconstrued. And if it doesn't get posted like that, it's like, I can't keep my instrument in tune anymore. My stamina is nowhere near how it used to be. Getting old, guys, taking the blue pill. But I would love to. I really would. Like, every now and again, I'll post some stupid-ass song, and I don't sing all that well. I think that's me desperately wanting to be able to play music, like, do video game covers, play like classical oboe on that. I can play the Morrowind theme, and I can play stuff like the Oblivion theme, because they're really easy. They're so simple. I used to be able to play anything, but I can't anymore. I'd love to be able to do stuff like that. It would be awesome to get involved with video games live, for instance, like say Lindsay Sterling has, TLO's crush at the moment. I don't know if that's still changed, but I actually met her in New York as a result of going to MLG New York. I met her the day before the event, and she's such a great person, incredibly talented, very, very positive outlook on life. So yeah, I've thought about it, but it would suck. So maybe at some point I get the time to practice again, but I would take a lot of effort. I just don't have the time anymore, and that actually makes me sad.
What is your end game? I mean, 30 years from now or 40 years from now, where do you expect to be? Will you still be with YouTube, or are you going to always kind of be on the cutting edge of whatever media is then?
Yeah, I firmly believe that streaming media and online media will replace television broadcasting within probably the next 2 decades as the predominant form of entertainment. it wouldn't surprise me in any way. I want to be on the cutting edge of that. I want to be on the cutting edge of whatever's there. If something happens to online, and to the point where people don't watch streaming and VODing anymore, I will try to go to the place where they are watching. I don't think television has the right model for me. I don't have any interest in getting into television. It's kind of the same reason I don't want to be in radio, because radio doesn't want me. Radio and television don't care about gaming, so why would I as a gamer care about them? So if YouTube is where it's at for the next 20 years, maybe 30 years, I will still be with them. And hopefully I will have a much larger subscriber base, and I will have better equipment. I will have a bigger staff working for me so that I can make better videos. I'll still be the guy on the front line because I love it. I don't have an aspiration. Like, I am where I want to be. I made it at 27, and I don't have any other aspiration than to continue to grow from where I currently am. This is not a stopgap for me. A lot of people use YouTube as a stopgap into television or into Hollywood. I don't care about that. YouTube isn't the stepping stone for me. The videos I put together now are not stepping stones. They are what I want from the rest of my life. I don't want to do some great things with my life. I'm totally cool with what I'm doing right now. Talking to lots of people, being able to broadcast to hundreds of thousands on a daily basis, being able to promote cool games, being able to positively influence the gaming industry, which I care so much about, that's my end game. That is where I am, and it can only get better from here. So here's hoping I don't fuck it up.
Finally, the last thing. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? I'll just leave it open-ended.
Well, pretty damn detailed, weren't we? We've talked a lot so far, but yeah, I just like to thank the people that have continued to support me. It's such a generic thing to say, and I think that a lot of people maybe say, "Oh, I love my fans." Like, you probably don't. Like, you've got hundreds of thousands of them. I'm pretty sure you can't individually care about each and every one of them. But the people that I do really, want to thank are the people that have supported me and made this possible. First, foremost, and most importantly, I want to thank my wife, because without her, there's no way I would be where I am. She was the person that originally drove me to this position. She was the driving force behind me going solo from WoW Radio, for instance, which was the right thing to do. And as a result, I have enjoyed huge success. She is incredibly talented. She is the best person I know. She's my best friend as well as my wife and the person that I love dearly. She is incredibly intelligent. She's very driven. She always challenges me. She won't just sit there, and she's not the yes girl. She's actually the opposite of that. We fight on business issues, and it's good for the company because we get so many great ideas. A lot of the great ideas that drove Shoutcraft and drive the ideas on my channel and even King of the Web. Like, the reason I ran for King of the Web is because she pushed me to it. I didn't want to do it, but she pushed me to it and said it would convince me it would be a good idea. And we raised, 15 grand for charity, and it's only going to get better. We're going to win that battle royale. We're going to put $50,000 into the hands of Charity Water so they can build clean water projects. She is the driving force behind everything I do, and I don't think I ever really thank her enough for that, and I don't give her the appreciation she deserves, especially not publicly. So there you go. But aside from that, all of my staff who work really hard to make this work out so well, all of the tournaments that have actually given me the opportunities to broadcast and do the thing that I love to do the most, and all of the people that have stuck by me through thick and thin, and even if they don't agree with everything I say, I certainly hope they don't agree with everything I say, because sometimes I talk out my arse, guys. So do be careful about what you listen to me and what kind of opinions that you take from what I say. But those guys who have stuck around and who continually watch my videos on a day-to-day basis, yes, I do appreciate it, even if the vocal minority people that I get pissed off at and I say that I hate. You guys aren't the vocal minority. You are the silent majority, and I don't blame you for not wading into YouTube comments. You guys are awesome, so thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
All right, well, that'll actually do it for this portion of Real Talk, but we still got more with TotalBiscuit. Right now, you should probably be seeing a link on the screen, which is going to throw you to the After Talks episode, where basically we're going to be answering every user submitted question that was submitted over on Reddit. So
all of them. Yeah,
we've got a little bit more of an interview coming up. But for now, John, thanks for coming on Real Talk.
No problem, man.
Guys, I hope you continue with us to the next video. We will see you there in just a little bit. If you don't, we've got more guests coming up. We've got Tasteless, Artosis. They're locked in, both separately. DJ Wheat will be happening next Friday. And still some other guys that I'm kind of working on right now. So stay with me, and I will do the best to keep you guys updated. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in just a little bit.